2 minutes to air. Morning. It is Monday, December 9th, 2019. Welcome. And this is another one of those little tests that we like to do from time to time, as you probably know. And I'm just going to adjust my headphones here a little bit so I hear you more clearly. Good morning. It is 42 degrees. We've got 42 degrees. It's overcast right now, windy with periods of rain throughout the Sound Shore. The temperature is going to get up to 55 today. I'm going to complete the weather broadcast because, well, we like to give you this warning early. Tonight, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Of course, today, windy with periods of rain, temperature at 55. Scattered showers again getting up to 55 tonight. Now, tomorrow, Tuesday, cloudy with rain late in the day. Get this, it's getting up to 61 degrees. And Wednesday, big surprise for you, after the 61, the temperature drops like a rock. Snow, early cloudy. It'll be early cloudy in the day, 36 degrees, and at night on Wednesday, getting down to 24. And it'll stay cold for a while. On Thursday, you'll have some sunshine at last, a high of 32 degrees. And of course, the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And next up, let's take a look at our headlines for the day. Now, we remind you, this is, okay, a little bit of an experiment, and not so much that we don't expect it to work, but it's an experiment because we are remote and we're testing our remote capabilities today. We have a lot of equipment. Now, what this means to you, once again, is that we can take our equipment out to your venue, your restaurant, your event, your business if need be, and we can do shows from just about anywhere on the planet. So you'll notice we have no video today, although we have that capability too. Today, in our new radio station, Radio Westchester, this is yet another test that you're participating in. Now, it's only a test in the sense that this is the first time that we're doing it and we're checking for any bugs. But more importantly, as with everything at this radio station, you get to participate. in it, at least as we grow, you grow with us. Everything's pretty much going to be the same. We won't take two calls at once, but our regular phone and call process, 914-222-3141, is working today. We expect that you will call us as you usually do, except we'd ask you if you get a busy signal, just wait and then call back. We'll cue you on the air. Now, this is Radio Westchester, the station at the train station. That's our home base. And we are almost always literally there, except today we are, and perhaps tomorrow, doing this as well. We will keep you informed. So you can't see my handsome face today. Don't all cry at the same time. But we are broadcasting as usual on Radio Westchester. Remember, you can go to the app, MyTuner Radio, and get our app there as well. Also on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Periscope. The program Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone, and we are Radio Westchester. Now, let's take a look at some of the headlines today, and that is not working. Well, we've got our first bug, and that is the music's not playing. We've only got two that are playing, and I don't know why, but we'll get somebody to check on that in a moment. All right, these are the headlines today. A fire destroys a Peekskill senior complex. New York wants to renew its favorite e-cigarette ban. Westchester residents are, and one of them, an alleged captain in the Gambino family, have been arrested. Some 12 individuals. Pleasantville police have ID'd the Liu family in a murder-suicide. And those are our headlines today, and we'll get right to it. Now, this is up in Peekskill on Compound Road, a senior complex there. A three-alarm fire on Saturday. The building under construction, 4 stories at 1847 Compound Road. And I got to tell you, it was a fire that you could see from miles around, and it's absolutely, okay, it's absolutely, we figured out we were hitting the wrong pop, aren't we? I told you, folks, there was something. There you go. All righty, we fixed our first bug, and guess what? The first bug was me. Figures. Okay, anyway, getting back to this, the senior complex up in Peekskill, Compound Road, not far from a business I had, by the way. There's a Yorktown Heights right next to Peekskill. Sorry, state. No one was hurt, but nonetheless, this under construction senior complex now burned to the ground. New York State wants to renew its flavored e-cigarette ban. The funny thing is, it has never been enforced, so legislators are working quickly to get it reinstituted before it expires. Nonetheless, they'll have to keep working on getting it confirmed. You do recall we had the location in Yonkers where the organization had been providing e-cigarettes. It was closed temporarily, and then it was reopened. So that is where we stand. New York's going to work hard to renew that. A Westchester resident and alleged Gambino captain have been arrested, 12 individuals in total. They were arrested for bribery, fraud, and obstruction of justice. One here in New Rochelle, several others over in Scarsdale. And we'll have more details on that as they come in. Once again, 12 individuals, including a captain, have been arrested for bribery. Captain of the Gambino family, bribery and fraud and obstruction of justice. Scarsdale residents, Bronx resident, and one New Rochelle resident. And in Peekskill, this is rather Pleasantville. This is a sad story indeed. Police have identified one Chan K, also known as Tom Liu. He has been identified as the man who killed his wife and 2 children. Now, what is known right now is that he was living under an enormous amount of stress. They didn't get into what the stress was. There were some indications that it might be job related, and this individual had no history of domestic violence, living up in Pleasantville only about a year or so after moving there from Queens, and not a lot is known about why he may have done that. And for those of you who like the details, He took his wife with a knife, also his two children with a knife, and then he used the knife on himself. Senator David Carlucci, also, we should note, one of those individuals who'll be running for the Nita Lowey seat that was recently opened up. Senator Carlucci is calling for donations of county to make up for the SNAP program. That's the food stamps program, which will soon eliminate a couple of million people, some 700,000 locally in the Northeast, off of the food stamp program. And that's pretty much the local news right now. We have a couple of other stories we'll get into later in the day as we get to our guests. Now, let's take a look at who those guests will be. We're going to be talking with Vince at 7:20 this morning. George Latimer comes to us at 7:35. And don't forget, 8 o'clock, we got Jake's Picks of the Week. How well did you do in picking Jake's football picks? Remember, he's winning. He's like 17, 12, and 1. But we'll see how he did. And one of the candidates, we will speak with David Buchwald today at 8:20. As you know, he seems to be favored by all. He is an assemblyman, but also he has done work with Nita Lowey, the congresswoman whom he would replace. She, of course, uh, as you know, retiring. And then at 9 o'clock, we have Bob Cox, who has been following the story of football coach DiRienzo here in New Rochelle, and also the embattled new school superintendent, Ms. Fejo, Dr. Fejo. We'll be talking with Bob at 9 o'clock. And of course, we'll be talking with you. But we do want to take another look at the weather, which we will do right now. It's 42 and overcast here in New Rochelle. So you don't know where we are, but we are in your minds in New Rochelle, aren't we? 42 and overcast, windy with periods of rain. Temperature getting up to 55. Tonight, mostly cloudy with scattered showers, 55. We've got some surprises for you here. Tomorrow, get out the bathing suits. It's going to be cloudy with rain late in the day. That's a with, not a wit. With rain late in the day, but the temperature is going to get up to 61 degrees. You like it, huh? Get over it. Because Wednesday, snow. Hey, I only report the weather. Don't be upset with me. Snow early, cloudy at 36. Snow will come early, rather. It'll be cloudy. The temperature only getting up to 36. That tops during the day. Tonight, down to 24. And just to show you that the weather gods like to play with you, on Thursday, you'll have sun finally. A high, though, only of 32. Now, remember, the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Now, remember, the programs coming up at the bottom of the hour are supported by Aging Issues Radio and their associates, Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Pena and Kahn, and Virtual Reality. As well as Dominic Cigars. They are the folks that sponsor Jake's Picks and the Week. And they're right over here in Larchmont on Boston Post Road. They've got all kinds of great cigars, Padrons, you name it. They're open 7 days a week. And I haven't seen a call come in yet, so let me just, my new board. Oh, this is all good. All right, a couple of other things to talk about. A lot of news today coming out of New York City as well as the nation. As you know, it looks like the Democrats will be going forward with impeachment, and this is becoming a very slippery slope. Here's how we see it. I guess you would say I see it. It's a slippery slope because the whole planet knows that there will not be, barring some unforeseen smoking gun, or one side or the other backing away or finding something new or changing their opinions, it will go to the Senate. It looks like almost certainly it will, particularly now that the Republicans are not going to fight, at least to the extent, nor can they fight because of the voting majority of Democrats, the fact that articles will be drawn up. And that's the assumption. But here's the problem, and we saw that with Clinton, and this is the slippery slope for the Democrats. There are a lot of people who realize that President Trump is not your ordinary president, but who like his achievements nonetheless, and therefore don't much care about all of this. There are those that maybe even think he crossed the line. I do. I'm one of those that think he crossed the line, but that it does not meet the level of removal of office. But nonetheless, it is legally and morally requirement of the Democrats. They're in a tough place because if they truly believe in the Constitution and they truly believe in their hearts, if indeed they do, I believe that they do, but what percentage of that is genuine and what percentage of that is political, just to get them out of office, is another matter. But there are those that, in those three categories, feel that, well, the president's not Mr. Clean, but he should not be removed from office. Let the people do it on election day. So the result from that could very well be some sympathy for the president, and even though I don't believe it would be true, give credence to the fact that all he has been in office is attacked. Now, one gets attacked if they keep breaking the rules. That's the other side to look at it. Anyway, my point, there are elements of this that could very well help the president and make him look like a victim, particularly if he's not removed from office, and or not. On the other hand, if the impeachment is presented clearly in a way that voters see, one, that what the president did does go beyond what his oath is, and two, if they believe that he should be removed from office, well, when they vote, they'll do the job. That's still a better outcome. And so those are the two areas, and where it's a slippery slope for our friends in the Republican Party, particularly the senators, is the essence of this whole thing. And I know I keep repeating it, and you'll forgive me, but it's extremely important to understand that the uh, impeachment, that is removal from office, impeaching is the indictment part, it's a process, but the actual removal from office is based on a high crime and misdemeanor that at the absolute end of the day, and the founding fathers so-called wanted it this way, it's what those senators who vote deem that it is. And that's a pretty good, healthy standard. Now, it's true. Come on. If you're an honest broker, you know that there are some Republicans that really will, if the president shot someone on Fifth Avenue, still vote not to impeach. There are others that will not believe it's an impeachable offense. But also among both of those camps are men and women who have to worry about running themselves. So if all of the proof that is presented does create something that is really onerous and ugly, and I shouldn't say onerous, but malevolent and ugly, they're taking a great risk voting for impeachment. Conversely, if they were to vote for impeachment, and they're not going to anyway, but if they were to vote for impeachment and the case made is flimsy, well, that's a risk for them. But in any case, every senator who's ever had to face this, and it's happened, what, 3 times before? Actually twice, because Nixon resigned, has faced the historic and pressure-filled position of creating this precedent. So this isn't going to be easy for anyone, not Democrats, not Republicans, certainly not for the president, but give the president his due. Uh, he will fight, and he will fight tooth and nail. Now, some of the stories within a story here, William Barr came out, and there was a story early today, and he's the Attorney General, that is starting to make noise that Giuliani's a problem for the president. Now, another story came out about William Barr today, all related to this. As you know, one of the positions of the president is that this is a witch hunt, and I've never accepted that. Of course, different people have different views. But always their witch hunt, if you will, element is there, because anytime a Democrat or a Republican gets anything on anyone, they go after it, whether it's legitimate, semi-legitimate, or even just smoke. And we can go back in history, and we know that the last 4 presidencies were plagued by this. Not so much funny George Bush's presidency, which created a world disaster, a great man, a decent human being, but certainly Clinton, and Clinton gave them reason, although a search for, and that's the way these investigations go, something that looked into a deal over real estate in Arkansas turned into the pursuit of some of his dalliances, shall we say. He was guilty. He was guilty of um, perjury over one of those dalliances. And again, those senators had a sacred issue to do. They could have voted him out of office on that if they deemed that a high crime and misdemeanor, quote unquote. But they did not. But nonetheless, after that, we had Benghazi. Again, something went wrong there, but it turned into a $27 million pursuit and all kinds of rhetoric. And even these things are pretext to Democrats similarly. So even if there were not these people that were arrested and the Manaforts and the Papadopouloses and all these other people, of course the Democrats would have pursued this with gusto. So that's the environment within which we live. But nonetheless, I almost got off my point, which is that the effort that is in terms of managing the message by the president and the Republican Party has been to say it didn't happen, or if it did happen, it was minimal. I mean, now it wasn't the Russians, it was the Ukrainians. And what about that FISA warrant? Let's investigate the investigators. Well, the inspector general, the man that works for Barr, the first guy Barr assigned, and this came out in yesterday's newspaper, but as you know, a couple of days ago, and the official report comes out today, is going to show that it was a legitimate, absolute, appropriate, based on his research, Mr. Horowitz's research, that it was an okay investigation that led to all of this, that the pretext, the pretense, the basis for it was okay. Now, Barr has come out and he's going to put himself in a tough spot here because now he's down to one other person. He also appointed a special investigator to look into criminality, if indeed any exists. And he is a man, Mr. Durham from Connecticut. Now, Mr. Durham has a great reputation on both sides, although so did Bob Miller, who was castigated and eviscerated, and everybody said these horrible things about him. And then when he turned out not to indict or call for an indictment of the president, he did hint that he should, that if he wanted to do anything, impeach him. But so this guy, Mr. Durham, will be a good guy until he comes back, if indeed he does, and says, no, I didn't find anything either. And then he will be, they'll find out he was a Democrat who once met a Democrat 30 years ago. But at any rate, it's highly unusual, but nonetheless, Barr is doing it. His own inspector general says that it was an appropriate investigation, and Barr says, I don't agree with that. It's not your choice. You're not the guy who did the investigation. But now, one of the concerns is, but again, Durham, we have to place our trust in some people, folks, when we can't function. If he comes back and says there was criminality, to be totally, you got to be fair to the president here, and I don't care how much you may not like how he behaves, but if there was criminality, it should be pursued with vigor. But if he comes back and says there's none, now this is how both sides play it anyway. After the election, they won't care. It'll just fade into the ether. But right now, between now and the election, it would be, I would think, in Barr's best interest, or the president's best interest, they seem to be the same, it would be in their best interest to hope that that investigation isn't concluded, because it would be highly unusual for the outside investigator, but it's always healthy, Mr. Durham, whom we all trust, to come up with anything different than the inspector general, because that's what we used to call in Wall Street, to use pedestrian terms, a break, a difference, a gap. And if that is the case, it's not going to say very much about the Justice Department if they can't conduct an investigation. But then again, investigating yourself is always tricky. So we await Mr. Durham and his investigation. Let's take a look at the time. It is 6:52. This is the one, the only Radio Westchester. We are the radio station at the train station. I'm Bob Marrone. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. And for those of you who are used to watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you can see our banner and you can hear us, but you don't see us today. And I want to talk a little bit about the radio station. Whenever we do one of these tests or put in something new, we involve you in it. We're all growing together. we will take suggestions as well. I'm going to give you an email, get a pen out, pencil, crayon, whatever you use. Bob at radiowestchester.com. Again, it's Bob at radiowestchester.com. And if you have an idea, if you have a guest type or a show type, now, along with all the other things that we're developing, and we keep coming up with new shows every day. People come in and say they want to buy one or create one or work with us to create one. Podhockey.com is coming along very nicely. We're just waiting to hear back from Joe Mullenfall, former Hall of Famer, Bobby Hull, a couple of other people, and even some local hockey players before we kick that off. The history of the Holocaust is a show that's near and dear to us for lots of reasons we'll get to later. We've done an awful lot of prep work that will be coming to you soon as well. Aging Issues Radio is already in the dock. We have another show that right now is confidential contractually, but a show you've heard for years elsewhere, and it will be moving to us as well. So a lot of new stuff coming up. We'll be doing a show with our friends at Choice who get homeless people and get them off the streets and into programs. In fact, with all the homeless issues we have, as we start that program, we also hope that it will be a banner for treating this homeless problem more seriously and draw attention to it. We'll also be doing a show about people who've been incarcerated with our friend Jeff Deskovic, who've been wrongly incarcerated, and the efforts being made to free them or get them. Those stories are horrendous. I shared some of them with you already. I'm covering an event. My favorite, it has to do with something we all deal with in the world today, which is how organizations don't work. In one case, a guy was convicted of a murder that he did not do. It got all the way to the U.S. Appeals Court, and the U.S. Appeals Court concluded that no crime was committed. It took another 10 years, and this doesn't speak well of Pennsylvania, but since it's the fact, there's no libel here. I'm sure there were, and this is the problem, Pennsylvania did nothing illegal. It was just their process, their, if you will, deep state, their infrastructure, their bureaucracy. It took them 10 years to get the man out of jail. His name is Terrence Lewis. We'll be talking with him when we get to that show. But we'll also have shows, lots of fun things that we'll do. We have some shows on art. We're developing a show on the spoken word and so forth. But nonetheless, so you've been growing with us, and we'll take your ideas, the things you care about, the politics you care about. And when you call, and those of you who listen regularly already know this, all points of view are welcome. We don't consider the point of view that I or other hosts as we move forward might put out there to be the answer. Just one point of view is a juxtaposition, something for you to wrestle with, agree with, or perhaps even change. That is something that at least I take great personal pride in, is if the facts are there and the issues are there, we'll turn around, not on a dime. And one of the issues we'll be talking about later today when we get with Bob Cox is what's going on with the school district here in New Rochelle and what's going on with the evolution of education in this country. I went from, I guess, and this is really a generalization, but just to make a point, someone who was left-leaning, certainly, not all the way to the far left, which is what I'm getting to, left-leaning, but then watched it fail, watched it crumble, and watched it reach its apex, its apogee, its pinnacle in failure by the hiring and the policies. And I didn't come to this word lightly, of the racist, and he is racist because of his position. Your racist doesn't even have to be a pejorative. In his case, I do intend that it is. But perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's just how he's wired. But Mr. Carranza in New York City is a racist. Everything's about race. And everything is about white supremacy, including if you are on your way to work today and you're worried about going to work. Maybe you're a builder. Maybe you're one of the guys I play hockey with, a wonderful builder, builds a lot of houses, works his butt off. Well, he probably doesn't know this, but if he pursues excellence, that is you can't make this up, folks. based on oh God, what are those things that you put a presentation on? Anyway, um, based on this series of slides that he's providing to teachers, a pursuit of excellence is somehow a sign of white supremacy. So too is adherence to the written word. So if you care about the law when you're watching the impeachment and you care about the law, and the next time you buy a house and you look at those words on a piece of paper, well, according to that particular slide, one of the slides he puts out there, that commitment to language it's just another sign of white supremacy. So the contract don't mean nothing. And yeah, I'm cherry picking. There are other things that are. I mean, there certainly is white privilege. Don't deny it. Absolutely don't deny it. But white supremacy or these things, because if any particular group is not good at these things, ergo, or if some members of that group are not good at these things, ergo, that's white supremacy. But my favorite is a sense of urgency. And so I want to tell all the brain surgeons, train conductors, engineers, airline pilots, cops on the job, firemen and women, I want you to know that your sense of urgency is a sign you can't make it up of white supremacy. What is wrong with this guy? How does he see the world? What skewed view? Because many of us share his view of the world, but not his response to it. Of course, there's white privilege. Of course, black folks have gotten a raw deal for hundreds of years, and many still continue to. And of course, there's implicit racism. It exists, but equally, there's implicit racism because of that against white people. So Miss Fajo sues to defend herself, and she's not allowed because she's white. Well, no, tough witties. Anyway, but I changed, and I didn't change on a day, but it came close. After the stabbing death, I did not know that we had such racial tension in our schools, or at least the far left is saying that there is, or is it their tension? I don't know. Until Valerie Schwab was killed, and it was flabbergasted because we were all concerned in the press, and caring people were concerned that a young woman was killed, and she was killed. She knew these people that killed her. Now, coincidentally, they were black. And I say coincidentally because not one conservative, and we got some very hard right people who called this program or called other programs that I've been on, not one of them made a racial incident out of this, even though the perpetrators were black and the girl was white. They all knew one another. They were all just high school students. Race had nothing to do with it, at least for all those of us in the press. In fact, we were kind of proud that the city was treating it for what it was until we went to City Hall, until I went to City Hall, and 1,000 people, or wherever it was, in the auditorium rather, not City Hall, but the school. And all of a sudden, it turned into, and here I am, people that I've known for years, the people that generally I have supported in their endeavors, a lot of Democrats who care about civil rights, etc. But instead of looking at the issue of why this girl was shot, it became and has stayed that way. And I know people listening understand what I'm talking about. Others saying, gee, don't keep mentioning this, Bob. It's going to hurt property. I don't want to hurt property prices. I don't want to hurt the school. It's actually, what's interesting is a much better school district than the people who were complaining and saying that racism was the problem, which I'm sure we have racism there, but I don't think it was the problem. All of a sudden, they've created the issue, the very issue that they were fighting. I'm sure with the best of intentions. But then everything that was said that night by this group that got up again and again reinstituted. It was like New York City came crashing down on New Rochelle. New York City came crashing down on New Rochelle. And then, of course, when you mix that into the more or less, well, no, not more or less, more of all the other issues that we had that did highlight, separate from the race issue, where the superintendent lost his job, executives lost their job, the principal of the high school lost their job. There were policies that were written but not followed, and some of them contributed to what happened to the young woman. Prior to that, due to the work of one of our regular guests and contributors, Bob Cox, a lot of corruption was uncovered. People went to jail, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the double-edged sword, and it does bother me because our school system is better than what the pushback and then the backlash, and you're hearing backlash now, has caused. And so now, and this is my position, and when Bob Cox comes on later today, you realize that we don't quite agree. And the disagreement is very subtle. Generally speaking, Bob's work is always based on facts. He knows his stuff. He doesn't get many things wrong. But there is a dynamic involved. And that dynamic is, and it only holds so long as, well, it holds, that this new superintendent is a person of uncommon integrity. And having an organizational background, as I do, having been an executive and having run a management school, I can tell you that there's nothing so earth shattering as someone with integrity who is consistent with it, because no one wants their sacred cow. It could be a teacher everybody loves, it could be a football coach, it could be a student who's well liked or who's a great athlete. It could be any one of a number of issues where the school board or the superintendent is asked to look the other way. And everybody wants integrity until their sacred cow is there. That's how I view this situation. And of course, we're going to wait and watch and see because she's new and she needs to be held to the standard. In fact, we hold her to a higher standard. Her integrity needs to be consistent. But that's how I view this. I view that, and again, I know that many of you are upset over her lawsuit, and I welcome you to come on and talk about it. But it's a non-starter if you say no white person can sue for bias. Then what we're doing is we're saying the rights of the individual mean nothing. And the same way I yell and scream about Republicans, at least this current administration, I'm reminding them that they need to accept that the law of the land and what America is and our system is what should be premier, not what you like or prefer. So too must our friends on the left accept that in America, in this country, the rights of the individual reign supreme. And so Ms. Fayho has every right to sue for any damn thing she wants, including if she believed she was wronged. Why would you deny her that? Why would anybody who cares about race, why would my friend Mark McLean, and I do consider him a friend, Mark feel that she shouldn't be there? Now, is it bad optics that she did that? She's in that lawsuit? Perhaps. But beyond that, why would someone who cares about the rights of a group or individuals, why would they care? And I think that they should take a hard look at that. Now, of course, to be fair to Mr. McLean in that instance, he's also supporting the football coach who was white. I get that. We've known Mark for years. But now as the head of the NAACP, he has extra responsibility, but comes with that responsibility is also remembering the rights of individuals. At least that's my take on that issue. So, and the reason I get into that issue is we'll be talking about it more and more as Fayho moves on. We're waiting. Bob Cox may have news today. We're awaiting what Bob described the other day when he called in and breaking news. We are all awaiting a disposition and in what many believe now is a separation agreement between Coach D and Coach D and the school system. Now, apropos of that, as we move on, a couple of other stories I want to get into before we go to break, which is we expect, we've reached out to the school system, and we are going to get separate of the issues with Mr. D, but we will keep him in our, that's his football team. He created it. Those assistant coaches who ran through, and that's what a good executive does. It, of course, sheds a positive light on him, well earned. But what we want to do without talking about this incident is get the athletes and the coaches, I guess they'd be the assistants. And of course, if Mr. D wants to come on, and his advice should be certainly welcome, to take a bow. But this has got to be about the athletes and the team and the people that support them. Now, the whole point of that little monologue is this. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. It doesn't matter if I'm part right or part wrong. What matters is what you think and how you feel. Everybody has an opinion. We take one, so you have a point to argue, agree with, rally around, or refute. But you get to do it here. Now, we're not going to open the phones just yet. We're going to open them in a few minutes. But 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141. We do want to go, though, to the traffic, or rather the weather once again. Traffic's also coming. All right, let's take a look at that. Where did I put them? Where do I put my weather report? Cancel, stop. Oh, we're learning a whole new system. All righty, never mind. Overwrite the track, load it into this cart. Overwrite it, yes. Let's see how that works. Brand new system we're using here. Okay, let's take a look at the weather. It is, how could I misplace the weather? Got to put an easel over here. Oh, I turned it face down. All right. We will find it. It is, just to recap for you, do remember that today is Monday, December 9th, 2019. When we come back from break, we're going to talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor, which, of course, was celebrated, if you will. It's really a memorial. You don't celebrate what happened then, but we do celebrate the bravery of our men. It's December 9th, 2019. And here's my weather. It's 42 and overcast. Now, tonight it'll be windy with periods of rain, the temperature 55. All day today, that same period of rain. A lot of wind, though, so be aware of that when you're driving and if you have lawn furniture still out there. Tonight, getting cloudy later in the evening with scattered showers, the temperature holding around 55. Tomorrow, cloudy with rain late in the day. The temperature will get up, now get this, to 61 degrees. Wednesday, snow early in the day, then cloudy, 36 degrees, but at night getting down to 24. But just to please you, you've had your 61-degree day. It's going to stay cold. Again, Wednesday, getting down to 24. Thursday, you'll finally get your sun, but only a high of 32 degrees. And of course, the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Some of the local stories that we're following for you. A fire, and this is kind of sad because they were building up in Peekskill a 4-story senior facility at 1847 Crown Pound Road, and it has burned to the ground. And this happened Saturday night. You could see this fire from miles around. And if you go on the different websites, Low HUD, News 12, you can take a look at it. And we got this story from them. So we give them our gratitude and acknowledgement. Folks, the thing burned to the ground like a crisp. Sad story that. It was for seniors. So hopefully insurance and everything, they'll get that thing running. Right now, there's no investigation that we know of. If there is, we'll let you know. New York. That's New York State is going back to the drawing board. The temporary emergency e-cigarette ban is about to expire, and it's never really been enforced. Haven't been able to enforce it because of court action, but they are nonetheless going to renew it and hope to win in court. And frankly, we hope they do. Enough is enough is enough is enough already. We know that this is hurting people. Now, it is sad that it's going to hurt businesses. Now, if those that are going to court to stop it, you want to get a fund together to help the businesses that are going to lose money, fine. But that's what we get into business for. This radio station is our business risk. It is what it is. They took a risk, but you can't, just because you took a risk, be allowed to hurt or, at worst case, kill people. A Westchester resident, there were actually several Westchester residents, one of them a New Rochellian, one an alleged captain of the Gambino crime family. They've been arrested over the weekend, a total of 12. Again, one of these people, a captain. They were arrested for bribery and fraud and obstruction of justice. And, well, we see these stories from time to time. It's just one of the backgrounds of modern life. And the sad story out of Pleasantville, we'll be talking about this in a little detail later on. They've ID'd the man who killed his wife and 2 children, of course, a murder-suicide. His name is Sean K. Liu, a.k.a. Tom. People knew him as Tom. And they say he was under great stress. They do believe work-related, but we don't have all the information yet. He used a knife to kill his wife, then his 2 children, then himself. Now, he had no history of domestic violence. That's why you never know. He was considered a good family man. We don't know why he snapped. Now, Senator David Carlucci, up county and parts of Putnam, Rockland, et cetera. Now, Senator Carlucci, he's interesting. Before we even get to this, he's one of the front runners to take the seat of Nita Lowey, who is resigning finally after 30 plus years in the United States Congress. At any rate, Senator Carlucci is calling for donations to make up for the food stamp shortage that will certainly result from the recent cuts in Washington. And a couple of million people plus are expected to be off food stamps, some 700,000 in the Northeast. Now, some of the other stories that we're following for you on a national and international level, this one's interesting. Russia's been barred from the Olympics because of their doping. And that just seems to be everything that goes on in Russia, isn't it? In terms of fake news and we didn't do it and the dog ate my athlete kind of stuff. But the problem that we run into with Russia is that that disease has spread here to the United States. It's spread to the UK. I mean, it's always been with all of us a little bit, but through social media, disinformation, lying, fake stories, planting bots. Russia, that's probably its greatest export, next to oil, is disinformation, lying. Now, I did want to take a moment to talk about Pearl Harbor. It is still amazing and a wonderful thing in a way that we commemorate Pearl Harbor every year. It brought us into World War II. The great irony is it happened early. The war might have stopped earlier, but at what cost? Thousands of lives. But nonetheless, take a moment, think about the people that lost their lives. Think about that soldier recently or that sailor who passed away. And he's one of several. The men, and most of them were men, who survived the Pearl Harbor bombing that got us involved in World War II. Many of them, when they died, they want their ashes put in the ship on which they served. And where they can, they are accommodating those people. Now, another item in the news today is the U.S. might deploy, we've been keeping an eye on this as best we can, this out of Washington, might deploy several thousand more troops in a place we just pulled out of in both perhaps Iraq, Iran, and Syria because of escalating violence in Iran. There are protests there, and Tehran's meddling in the region. It could prompt the Pentagon to send up to 7,000 military personnel to the Mideast. And the troop deliberations follow several decisions since spring to beef up U.S. presence in the Middle East because of the series of maritime attacks and bombings in Saudi Arabia. President Donald Trump has approved those increases, even though he also routinely insists that he's pulling troops out. Now, that's the dilemma that the president has. And this has nothing to do with his politics or the impeachment or anything. He'd like to get us out of those wars. He has said that he would, and he's trying on one hand to keep a promise. But on the other hand, and I'm sure he rues the day we went into Iraq in 2003. But unfortunately, we made the mess, and as Colin Powell said at the time, if you break it, you own it. So how we get out and how we free ourselves, we went in there as liberators, and what we did was destabilize the whole region. And so the president's trying, and you got to stick with him on this one, folks. Forget your politics for a moment. He's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Now, I didn't like his pulling the things out of Syria. It was knee-jerk and it hurt the Kurds, but at least that's my opinion. But this is just tough of what's going on in the Middle East. So, meanwhile, some good news came out of it. A Princeton University scholar held for 3 years in Iran on widely criticized espionage charges was freed Saturday as part of a prisoner exchange that saw America release a detained Iranian scientist, a rare diplomatic breakthrough between Tehran and Washington after months of tensions. And yes, please do, in this case, give the president some credit. Now, a story that I saw, and some of us were talking about this last week, sending texts back and forth and talking on the phone, and some of our favorite subjects, like, for example, salad pizza. McDonald's is looking to get a leg up in the chicken sandwich wars, but diners participating in its latest poultry pilot are clucking their tongues, said a story in the New York Post. Pressured to profit from a nationwide craze, the giant this week began testing its crispy chicken at dozens of restaurants. Yuck. That's pretty much what everyone's saying. They tested it and they say it just isn't very good. You need to adjust it. And chicken. You know what I get a kick out of? For those of you, and look, I'm among you. This is not just going out. This is self included, and we'll get to that call in a second. All right, caller, we'll get to you in a moment. For those of you who like salad, pizza, and things like that, these sandwiches that are coming out, these veggie sandwiches, if you're going to do them, please make them taste good. All righty, we've got some sports stories, and we'll get to those sports stories in a little while. But first, we're going to go to our first phone call in a remote broadcast. So let us welcome them to the show. Now, let me just double check the time here. It's 7:17 because we have a guest in about 3 or 4 minutes. But let's take this call. Good morning. You're on Radio Westchester.
Good morning, Bob. It's Lorraine Carl from Washington, D.C. How are you?
Hi, Lorraine. We're both remote. What are you doing down in Washington, beloved?
An exhibit for cell biology. So.
Wait a minute. You're exhibiting your cells in Washington?
No.
Oh.
Biology.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Sorry.
Biology is part of it. No, I'm just, anyway, what's going on? What have you to say, young lady?
Well, I just wanted to say that I was looking at a tweet that was sent out about when BOCES had their meeting with the public about the superintendent.
Yes.
And what, I just wanted to let you know when they were searching for one after Mr. Organishak, we also said that we wanted someone to live within New Rochelle.
Good idea.
And he did not live in New Rochelle. He lived in New Jersey.
Mr. Osborne lived in New Jersey.
He didn't want to move to New Rochelle because he didn't want teachers to feel stressed if they had his children in their classroom. So I feel people are grasping at straws now. It's just ridiculous. I just think it's ridiculous. They should be concentrating on the education of our children in the district.
Now, have you been at any of the meetings that Ms. Fajo was at? Dr. Fajo?
Oh, yes, sure. Yes.
To me, and again, it's my stake in the ground. I think she's the real deal, and I think she has a lot of integrity. How that's going to fly in our school district is another story.
I think so. I just don't think they should be listening to what she plans to do within the district and then hold her accountable if she does not fulfill her promises. So, to bring this up about her living 30 miles from New Rochelle is just absolutely ridiculous. And half the people that are complaining about this particular issue were never even at the town hall meeting when we had Dr. Osborne. Why didn't they have a big fit about that one? I don't.
Well, Lorraine, you've lived through it and you know as well as I do that one. We are out. We see it, to be fair, we see it with the president. We saw it with Obama. We saw it with Clinton. We were talking about it earlier. Now we see it with this woman. If they'll take at anything. If they find out that she once tripped on a sidewalk and bruised her knee, we're going to hear about it. They just don't want her there. Now they've dug in their heels.
No, they don't want her there. Yeah, they just don't want her there.
Well,
that's it, plain and simple. I don't even know if they don't want her there because they didn't feel they were included in the process. I mean, how many people that are complaining were at the BOCES meeting?
Well, yes.
But, I don't know.
But what they should do then is go back, the people that elected, and I say this weekly, but as you saw, Bob Cox did a story over the weekend about Hasty. I'll tell that caller to move away. Caller, we'll get back to you. No, I'm not going to answer it. I got to figure out how to get rid of that. There we go. Bob Cox did a story about Hasty, the former. You still there, Lorraine?
Head of
Good.
The board.
Yeah, I did that well. Former head of the board was a very interesting story. Who may now be saying he doesn't want Hasty. I'm not sure about it. We'll find out from Bob at 9 o'clock. But if they want to go back in time and they want to reelect or unelect Mr. Hasty and unelect Ms. Mazzelli and realize, oh my God, gee, these school board elections do matter, well, then they should go and do that. But a duly
Yes,
elected,
they should vote.
right,
They
a
should
duly
vote.
elected school board put this woman there. And come on, you and I both know the real reason they don't want her there is A, that she sued the city of New York, and B, she's white. Let's get real. We need to put our cards
Well,
on the table.
but on the other hand, they're praising the coach, though, who's white. I mean, you can't have it both ways.
Sure you
I
can.
don't think you can. I'm not saying that we don't have enough teachers and administrators in New Rochelle of color. I'm not saying we do have enough. We don't, but we have to have the best of the best. That's what we have to have. And by keep on doing what we're doing, we cannot attract the best of the best.
No, and look, white, green, purple.
Here.
It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. You know,
No, it shouldn't matter.
And the last thing we need is, and if we get, I mean, if the next person 3 years from now is a person of color, great. We had a principal who was a person of color. Maybe that I could care. I mean, not that I could care less. It is important to have them. But
no. But when my child went to school, his first introduction to teachers were 3 black women in Stevenson School.
Yeah.
3 women of color. And they were fantastic. I graded every teacher after them. The way they reacted to the classroom, what they were teaching, they were administrators. I mean, it was Barbara Russell and Miss Elise Nichols and Mrs. Kershaw, who I never knew her first name because you wouldn't dare call her by her first name.
Well,
but they were wonderful. They were wonderful. I mean it. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience.
These are difficult
and I hope
times.
Every child has that kind of experience.
These are difficult times. They really are in terms of
very
language.
Difficult.
Do you know what still stays in my head? Do you remember the guy they hired out of Baltimore who was supposed to be the absolute be all and end all to fix the problem in our schools? Remember he put some task force together. Some doctor out of Baltimore.
Oh, yes. Right, exactly. Yes,
I had one press conference.
With the handpicked committee.
The handpicked committee was clawed together. This guy.
Yes.
I had one press conference with him, and it was useless because he wouldn't speak frankly. I'm going to repeat what I asked. Go ahead.
They were under sanction not to speak.
No, but he was under sanction. He was under sanction to use weasel words. I said to him, he said, I come from corporate America, which most broadcasters do not. And I've run enough task forces with tens of millions of dollars on the line to know what a task force is and what we do. So the first thing you do is you identify the problem, and then you state the objective that you want to resolve the problem. So I went down that path, and they said, have you identified the problem? There is no problem. Excuse me, there is no problem. Our goal is to be sure that people who don't have opportunity get opportunity. I said, what does that have to do with why we brought you in? And it devalued from there. That was Mr. Weasel. The guy had a PhD.
I understand.
I wonder if he mailed away with it like some of these ministers do. I could become a minister. Send away in the mail. Go ahead.
The thing is, too, I agree there are many children in the district that do not have opportunities. Many. There are many children that come from horrible homes, and they're not necessarily poor children. You can come from a horrible home and have everything at your fingertips.
Look at your poor kids.
Your home life could stink. One day we'll go into that one.
We just opened that one up for you. Listen, I have a guest coming on, and I have to go. He probably hates me now. Thank you very, very much.
And I'll give my regards to Melania for you, okay?
Melania Trump?
I'm having lunch with... yes, I'm having lunch with
Please
her
do.
tomorrow. And, all right.
Are you really? I see, I never know. All right, listen. And don't forget to show all of Washington your biology. Bye. She hung up on me. All right, Vince. I know he's probably saying, "Boy, Bob, you're supposed to call in." Yeah, but that was too good a call for us to let go. So we'll get back to Mr. Pain in the butt. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Here he is. Oh, my phone system is working really well remotely. We're working remotely. All right, let's see. There he is. Yeah. All righty. Mr. Russo, Vince Russo, good morning, sir. How are you? Sorry to get to you late.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Very well. So much going on, so little time. We're doing yet another test of our system. It's actually working pretty well. We are in the netherworld. We don't disclose where we are because what we want is for people to know that we're going to be able to do this show from anywhere on the planet, including your business. And perhaps by tomorrow, we even will be able to show. Well, we'll be also doing remote video, but our first test was just to get all this new audio equipment working. And so far, so good.
Well, yeah, it sounds good.
In fact, ultimately, I wouldn't even be saying that if we were visual, because it wouldn't matter, because it's a radio show that you just happen to get to watch. But since we've included our listeners in the evolution of this new, more modern, and more technologically sophisticated radio, we like to share with them how we're doing what we're doing. Couple of things. What's your take on the impeachment and what's going on? Particularly, what's your take on Rudy Giuliani and William Barr now saying he's worried that Giuliani is going to hurt the president?
Well, because he can. He's a loose cannon. You know, he spouts off his mouth. He says stuff. He says stuff in the morning, and then in the afternoon they say, "Hey, you said." He go, "Oh, I didn't say that." So I think what's going to happen is that Trump inevitably is going to throw Giuliani under the bus. Mm-hmm. He's going to blame him for the whole thing. And then Giuliani then is going to open up his mouth and implicate Trump.
I'd like to, this is funny. I'm of two minds. This is my greatest hypocrisy. If you're in bed with someone and you're loyal to them, you kind of should go down with the ship. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the only one during Watergate who did it was Liddy. And the reason I always admire John Dean so much is he dropped a dime because they were trying to make him the scapegoat. And he was just a lot smarter than the rest of them. I love John Dean. But
you're talking about rational people.
No, but you know what? If you're going to bat for the president and you're going, and this is just me, maybe because I grew up around this, or the way we grew up, we did have standards. You don't rat on someone you're going to war for. So Giuliani should take the fall.
Well, he's crazy. I mean, you listen to some of the things he did, and you contrast him from when he was mayor. I don't know what happened to this guy. I mean, he really went over the cliff. So I think what's going to happen is Trump inevitably is going to throw him to the wolves the way he did everybody else, or everybody that was loyal to him. Once, the spam hit the fan, Trump just tried to jettison whoever he had and blame them. He's going to do that with Giuliani, and Giuliani is going to react in the way Giuliani normally reacts, and he's just going to run his mouth.
See, that's the unfortunate thing. And then Giuliani becomes a dean in that case. See, if I'm going down for you, that's a terrible, could make me popular. But if I'm taking the fall for you, okay, I at least expect you to show some respect for the fact I did it. And that's where Haldeman and Ehrlichman did wrong by John Dean. They wanted him to wear the whole thing, but they did it with malice. They did it
because they didn't want to go to jail.
Yeah, but you know what? Then you sit down with them and say, look, one day, that's why at least the mob, or at least in lore, they say, we'll take care of your family, blah, 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 do the time. Unfortunately, politicians don't have the honor of some mobsters. I mean, say what you will about John Gotti, he did the time, he didn't flip. And that's a whole nother thing. We call for honor, but expect it of no one. Now, what about the impeachment? Do you think that, oh, by the way, no, I want to go back to Barr because he finally gets the report from Mr. Horowitz, his IG, his investigator general. Right, yeah, it's IG. And he says, well, I don't agree with it. you know, you know, I got my man looking into it. Now I don't agree with what he did. I mean, you're going to run out of doctors soon. You know, he says I got cancer. Well, I'm not going to find another doctor. Go ahead.
It's the way this administration has been playing the game all along. You know, every single thing that comes out, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just the impeachment. I mean, it's the Iran nuclear deal. Well, you know, everybody says, the inspectors and everybody say it's working. Oh, no, it's not. Our people say it's not working, so it's not working. All this stuff with North Korea, you know, Kim Jong-un is going to do such and such. No, our people say no. They just make this stuff up.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know where I do feel bad for the president, and you may have heard it in my monologue before. And this is George Bush, decent human being. He could not have screwed the planet up more than going into Iraq, although I supported it at the time. I believe that weapons of mass. I mean, this thing ain't going away. And the president, because he doesn't like to go through briefing papers, I don't think he quite understood how intractable these issues are. And that Colin Powell tried to warn everyone, if you break it, you own it. And it just, what instability we created in that region. The best thing we could have... Go ahead.
When you have someone who's leading the country by tweet, he thinks that he can like put one of these stupid Twitter things out there, and then that's the way the country gets run. He doesn't have to read briefing papers. He doesn't have to be informed about these various issues. He doesn't have to rely on the intelligence agencies. He doesn't have to put competent people in as secretaries of various cabinets. What do you expect? I mean, this guy is he's making this stuff up as he goes along.
Yeah,
as far as the impeachment goes, he's never going to get impeached. The Republicans, unlike Watergate, where the Republicans followed the same kind of pattern, you know, as they are now. They were dead set against it. They don't want to have even the Watergate impeachment inquiry. Then as the thing went forward, more and more information came out, and then of course the tapes clearly showed Nixon colluding.
They absolutely did
with the cover-up, and then the Republicans, who were honorable people at that time, just said, "All right, you know what? You guys are right, and we have to get rid of them." That is not going to happen now.
No, it's not.
I don't care. As they said, you know, as Trump himself said, if they had a video of him shooting a guy in the head on 42nd Street, they would still not impeach him. So it's a matter of
it is certainly
it's a futile exercise, and I thought strategically, and you and I disagreed on this. Strategically, I don't think that the Democrats should have brought the impeachment.
No, I think it was a mistake. Listen, I got to run, but thank you very much. We're going to talk again tomorrow. We have more to ask you about. That's Vince Russo, everybody. We're going to go to the, he's on the line now. We're going to go to the county executive in a moment. But first, a quick update on the weather. Right now, we're looking at 42 degrees. It's overcast across the Sound Shore, windy with periods of rain. And that's the way it's going to be today. Temperature getting up to 55 tonight, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. 55 degrees tomorrow. Get this, get out the bathing suits. County Executive Latimer, reopen the pools. It's getting up to 61, but with rain late in the day. Wednesday, snow. Close the pool again, County Executive. Snow early in the morning, getting up to 36, but at night it gets down to 24. We're going to lose 40 degrees in one day. But don't worry, Thursday the sun comes back, 32 degrees. And of course, the weather, as always, is brought to you exclusively by our friends at United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. The bottom of the hour today is brought to you by our friends at United Hebrew, a top-rated campus of senior care, and also by Aging Issues Management, Aging Issues Radio, Pena and Con Law Firm, Virtual Reality, and the fine cigars of Dominic Cigars. And remember, at 8 o'clock, they bring you Jake's Picks of the Week. Without further ado, we move forward. He's with us each and every Monday, and we're grateful for his time. Please welcome County Executive George Latimer. Good morning, County Executive.
Good morning, Bob. And while we won't open or close the pool based on one good day, you can bet that our golf golfers are going to be out at the golf course this one good day.
That's
They want
true.
to play if the weather gets good.
Now,
Absolutely true.
County Exec, do they come out with their golf bags and just putt around, or do you actually open the course?
Well, we don't open the course for one good day once the season
Oh,
closes.
okay.
And this time of the year, But, anybody, I'm not a golfer, but anybody who's a golfer, the minute they see a possibly decent day for golf, they're ready to go at a moment's notice.
Oh, they certainly are. I guess we should get into business, but I got a kick. Every time I do the weather, I look at it and I say, this is weird stuff. But the weather is what the weather is. I wanted to see how the budget process was coming along. I know that the biggest debate really hasn't been among, or at least as we could see it from here, it hasn't been so much the issue with the commissioners, et cetera, or your deputy. More of it has been focused on the county legislators. Are they looking for any changes, or does that debate continue?
Well, today is the day in which the Board of Legislators meets to finalize the budget. And as a separate set of actions, they also deal with their pay situation, the proposed pay increases. So they had a public hearing last week on the pay, but they've had public hearings on the budget. And, I'm loath to let this whole discussion of the budget turn into whether or not the legislators' pay should go up. We put together an excellent budget. This budget, for the first time in 9 years, cuts property tax levy. This budget adds $10 million to our reserve fund. This budget stops for this year any one-stop financing and one-shot deals that would help balance the budget that can't be replicated next year. And this budget does not borrow a dime to handle our obligations going forward. Now, in the headline tomorrow, it's going to be all about the legislative pay raise.
Right.
But the legislative pay raise issue represents a fraction of the $2 billion budget that's being voted on today. When we talk about $10 million into the reserve fund, last week we just got S&P to give us an upgrade to stable from negative outlook. That is significant news, and that comes at the cost of $10 million. Put aside, so you're saving money for a rainy day, like today. And the upshot of it is that to me is the real substantive story. How they handle the pay raises today, I don't know that there'll be any changes. I think if they have the votes, they'll vote for it today, and then we'll go forward. But I'm a little concerned that the discussion about what we've done has been hijacked by the discussion of pay raises. But it is what it is.
Well, you probably expected that.
Respond to what they understood.
No, you probably expected that a little bit. No.
Here's the thing, Bob. Here's the thing. How many people call you every day, in some way, shape, or form, over your whole career, and talk about how their taxes are killing them? Taxes.
I have one.
By the way, did I mention
taxes?
Right. Did I mention taxes?
Yeah.
By the way, did I?
County Exec, I have 1 ear dedicated to it. Yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
This budget cuts taxes for the first time in 9 years, and we're not talking about that. And that, I must say, is irritating. But we go on. This is not my first time at the rodeo.
Nope.
So I recognize that the media and some individuals will focus on what they want to focus on. And, the budget, if it gets adopted today, on time, balanced, cuts taxes, does good fiscal policy, and I might add, and the Board of Legislators added to this, with programs that we think are necessities in the community for child care and a host of other different needs. So all in all, I think it's a good budget. We're going to have to wait and see what happens from Albany when they balance their budget, because they could surprise us with some additional mid-year expenses, and we'll have to deal with that when we get to that point.
Yeah, we did see in the news, and this was really a state issue, and I was concerned about the trickle down for the county's concern. They have a $6 billion budget hole, and the issue of Medicaid, which hits our county hard, was brought up. Do you see that impacting the county or in any way, or is it too early to tell?
It could. It very well could. It's up to, the governor's going to present his budget in about a month, and then the legislators in Albany, my former colleagues, will have about 2.5 months to kick it around and see what they want to do with it. Obviously, we're hoping that the state's problems don't instantaneously become the county's problems, because we have done what we have had to do. We've been diligent. We've We've watched we watched our circumstances. They have given us an additional revenue stream that we had to have, but only to the point of equality with other jurisdictions. We didn't ask for any more than what Putnam, Rockland, New Rochelle City, White Plains City, and other communities have gotten. So in the long run, since we've gotten to a point where we think now we can go in a couple of years, well, if in fact the state decides to drop a series of costs down to the local level, then we're going to have some difficulties. But let me also say this: the state has many options of things they can do. They can legalize sports betting, which I would support. I don't bet, but a lot of people do. New Jersey is making a lot of money off of sports betting, and I think New York State could legalize sports betting, and that would bring in revenue that would help balance the budget. There are two, staying on the topic of casinos, or gambling, I should say. MGM Grand, the Empire City facility, which is just slots at this stage of the game over in Yonkers, has put in an application to become a full-fledged casino. And if they get that, they will make contributions to the local governments and to the state government on a tremendous level. The one out in Queens, Resorts World, is the number one taxpayer to New York State. So my sense would be they could authorize those two casinos to come into play. There are other issues at hand, but they could do that. Those two actions alone would help narrow that gap without having to take a dime out of the county too, or for that matter, school districts or any other jurisdiction.
Amazing that is. Our guest is County Executive George Latimer. Of course, we always wind up talking about money and taxes, but we also talk about revenue and possible revenue streams. Speaking of the gambling, we did a story, I'm sure you were aware of it Friday. The Empire Casino let go their new CEO, MGM, of course, pining for the right to do that. How much, from your knowledge at the state, how much pushback are they getting from the upstate casinos? And I'm sure even we've read Atlantic City won't like the idea, but why should New Yorkers, and this is my rhetorical question, but just want your reaction to it, why should we in Westchester or New York City always have to be schlepping hours to gamble when we could have it right here in our backyard and at a racetrack to boot?
Well, what's amazing right now is that the Yonkers Empire City Casino is more profitable than any single hotel on the Vegas Strip. Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. That enough people go in there and play slots. They have some electronic table games, but they're not as popular as when you deal with the real croupier. They generate more profit in that facility just because it has nonstop slots than any hotel on the Vegas Strip. When you think about that and you say, now, if you make them a full casino, hotel, a venue for concerts and special events that would attract gamblers to come and stay overnight, the jobs that it means in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and the Bronx, the revenue would be phenomenal. However, the upstate casinos have a problem. And, I feel for them. And if I were an upstate county executive, I'd have my difficulties with it as well. But the truth of the matter is, you put a casino in a more convenient location, and people will go to the more convenient location.
Of course.
And Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, a couple hours up the line, Monticello, a little closer, Saratoga, a little further. You put a full casino in Yonkers, and you're going to have to somehow make whole the four upstate casinos because their market will shift to Yonkers and Queens for full casino benefit. But here's the bottom line. You've given some of those casinos a 3-year head start, and the market isn't strong enough because the population base isn't strong enough. When you go up to Waverly, New York, raise your hand if you know where that is. It is far away from the population centers. And while certain people get on a bus and say, oh, let's go 2 hours to a casino, Atlantic City, 2.5 hours, they're not going to go 4.5 hours. And so they'll much more likely take the close-in casino, and that's why Yonkers and Aqueduct will be the big winners once they're authorized.
Well, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And, do you think they'll come up with some sort of, or at least an easing of the issue by revenue sharing or something like that? I guess, like you said, they have to make them, if not whole, I guess help them a little bit. Is that a possibility? Some sort of revenue sharing?
Well,
do you think?
I'll credit Governor Cuomo. He's one of the shrewdest people I've ever dealt with in public office. He has been, more able to come up with the rabbit out of the hat scenario than anyone I ever met. If you'd have told me that we'd have gotten a brand new bridge built across the Hudson the way it was, it really was a phenomenal accomplishment.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean that everything I do, or he does, or you do, we automatically agree with. But he's looking at a budget deficit. He closed a larger one 8 years ago. I think it was 2011, when he first came into office, he had a $10 billion gap to close, and it was not done easily or without pain. Ask any of the school districts. But that was the bigger budget gap, and it was closed, and reestablished over time. So now the question at hand is, can the budget gap be closed without passing the pain down to other levels of government that, frankly, don't have the resources to be able to handle the pain? We're talking about mandates for things that we don't administer, and we're just having to pick up the cost of it. I'd love to be able to mandate you to pay for part of my new car.
No, that's okay.
But it would be nice for me, but not for you.
No, it would
but
not.
We'll see what happens. I'm going to be optimistic and believe that some combination of things, I think I've laid a couple of them out, sports betting and the 2 casinos, is a way to lessen the pain of this budget gap.
Hey, County Executive, one of the stories we've been following this morning, and I don't know if you've been briefed, but a terrible fire up in the Peekskill. I don't know, are you aware of this one yet? I
did. I just got an early briefing on it, but I don't have enough information on it to really be, conversant. I'm going to leave it at the professionals are investigating, and we're all going to try to be helpful. But the punchline in all of these things is that this is what happens in day-to-day living and administering a community, that tragedies occur. We had a terrible tragedy in Pleasantville a few days ago.
Yeah, we love with that story
today. For
today.
his reasons, kills his wife and 2 children, and we have to respond through our county police. We have to respond through our mental health department, and it is just not an easy thing to do on a regular basis to face up to these kind of problems. But that's what we do every day. That's our job.
Well, that's why I bring it up. You must, I guess you get inundated when you get made aware. Of course, the city of Peekskill will handle this. It's just one of those fires that you could see from miles around a senior home. We're talking with County Executive George Latimer. We're going to take a quick break in a moment, and then we want to find out what he is working on right now. One of the questions is, let me get to this one question now, because I was on with another journalist the other day, and he was saying, looking at the budget and the projections in it, their question was, how comfortable are you that the tax projections for the income coming from the 1% tax increase, how comfortable are you that will hold true next year? Of course, you don't have a Ouija board, but how comfortable are you with those projections?
I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with the numbers. I think people have raised a question without having any real reason to raise the question.
Well, yes, that's true.
They just fear that something is going to go south. The indications we have, I spoke to a person just yesterday. You know the name, but I'm not at liberty to share it because he shared this with me informally. Very prominent Wall Streeter person who has lived in Westchester County, friend of mine. And I asked him about that. I said, we've made our estimations based on a stable 2020 economy and slight growth. Not huge growth, but slight growth. I said, is that a fair assessment? He says, very fair. And then what he said to me, and I think it's very interesting and makes some sense now, is that 2020 is a presidential election year. And when you have a presidential election year, you have to make sure that, your incumbent president, in this case Donald Trump, gets elected. And so they will make efforts in the economy to make sure if there's any problems in the economy that they be dealt with short-term strategies that will work. And that made sense to me. Now what will happen in 2021 is anybody else's guess. But so I do think our projections are realistic. We have not overestimated revenue. We have not established revenue based on what we wanted to spend. But we have identified how much spending we can do based on the revenue we're going to have. So I'm very confident. Now, having said that, anything can happen.
Well, yeah, and if anything happens, your critics will be over you. But you're used to that for sure. County Executive, can you stay with us another few minutes? We wanted to see what you're working on and what's coming up. Just got to take a quick break for the weather. That's County Executive George Latimer. We will back with him in a moment. Let's take another look at the weather, and the weather's kind of interesting today, and that's to say the least. Well, it's 42 right now, and it's going to rain off and on throughout the day. Now, tonight, you'll have scattered showers. 55 degrees will be the high. The big surprise, more rain tomorrow. We expect that. Again, temperatures in the mid-50s. But the big surprise is Wednesday. believe it or not, temperatures will get up to 61 degrees. And just as you're ready to put your bathing suit on, the next day it'll drop like a rock. Snow in the morning, temperatures averaging in the mid-30s, and then at night getting down to 24. Weather is, of course, brought to you by and exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. The final segment of this hour is brought to you by our friends at Aging Issues Radio, Aging Issues Management, Pena and Con Law Firm, virtual reality. And again, as soon as we do our grand opening, we will be giving away free experiences in our studios right at the train station, Radio Westchester in New Rochelle, and Dominic's Fine Cigars. And coming up at 8 o'clock, we'll be talking with Jake Schaefer, and Jake will share with you the results of his picks of the week. Plus, we have some of the sports stories to discuss with Jake. And we return now to our conversation with the county executive, George Latimer. Welcome back, sir. And what's coming up for you this week? What do you want to shout out about, and what will you be doing?
Well, this week we're going to work on our public hearing after the budget is done on our shared services plan. We're trying very hard to find ways to cooperate with local governments to save money. We announced last week an extension of our arrangement for the county police providing local services from Mount Kisco. We're going to share that plan around with other communities to see if they, can follow suit. We hope that they will. We have a meeting coming up with where we are with our airport plans and our public transparency plans to discuss the master plan that we're working on developing. We promised we would do a new master plan. We've contracted for that purpose, and we specifically contracted for community outreach because we know that people involved with the airport are particularly concerned about not having their voices heard. So that is going to be something we work on this week. We just had a public meeting on Saturday morning on the Mirstead property, which is an estate that was given to Westchester County back in the 1980s. We haven't put any capital in it since 2000. It's deteriorating, and we have to do something about it. So we had a meeting just on Saturday, and now we're going to start implementing some of these things. And, the completion of the budget process, Bob, is probably the single most important thing that happens all year, but it's not the only thing that happens. We have to administer the county every single day. And, there's some holiday shopping for family and friends. Yeah, there's, maybe kick back a little bit at a holiday party or two. I'm going to try to get to the Gail Rice event tonight in New Rochelle after we're done in White Plains to honor her service to New Rochelle. But, there's work to do every day. I am now just about halfway through my 4-year term, and I like to think we've done some very good things. But there's some very good things we have yet to do, and we're going to try very hard to do them.
This is always fun for me, having known you for all these years, from your days as before that, and an assemblyman and a senator, and now this job. You've gotten pretty high marks from most people, which I think you're aware of, and that's not to blow smoke at you. That's just the zeitgeist. What's it been like? Has it been more interesting than you thought? Has it been more troubling? What's it been like?
Well, it's certainly been interesting because the breadth and scope of an executive job is different from a legislative job. And I was a legislator in all these other positions, and I worked very hard as a legislator. But, you don't have unitary power. You're one of a number of people, and you advocate and you push and you prod. Because I had private sector experience, as we've talked about many times before, I've understood what it is to have the responsibility to run something. But I never had much of a chance to show it in the public domain, other than the 4 years I was chairman of the board of legislators 20 years ago. So in my sense, I've always been hiding in plain sight. That, the nature of the jobs I had, senator, assemblyman, did not lend itself for me to show what I could do. And to tell the truth, which you know as well as I do, I wasn't expected to win the race that I won until very late in the campaign. And I didn't think I was going to win for most of the campaign. So when I wound up winning, I viewed it as this gift that I've been given. The voters had the trust in me to make a leap of faith, change, CEs, and give me a chance to do it. And so I take the job seriously every day. I don't take myself seriously. I'm still a sports fan, a music fan, a regular guy. Hey, how you doing?
We see you on Facebook. Classic rock fan. We like that.
Yeah. Which screen was better, Roger Daltrey or Joe Cocker? But the bottom line is I take the job seriously. I want to do a good job. I think we're up to a very good start in 2 years. But again, there's a lot to do. And I'm sure the last day I'm in this job, whatever length of time I'm in it, on the last day that I'm in it and I leave it the next day, I'll know that I didn't do this, I didn't get this done, and this is still a problem for the next person. So you'll never do everything you want. John Kennedy said it in his inauguration. All of these things will not be done in the first 100 days, nor in the first 1,000 days, nor in the lifetime of our administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin. And so that's our task. Our task is to begin.
Well, thank you very much for all your time today. Continued good luck. And we'll talk to you again next week. County Executive George Latimer, thank you so much.
A pleasure, Bob. Have a great week.
All right. Take care. We look straight ahead. We're going to be talking with Jake Schaefer soon. What an exciting thing that Jake, that's right, Jake's got his picks to share with us, and we're going to reach out to him, put him on hold. All right. And then we'll have a chit-chat with Jake Schaefer. But first, we want to tell you who brings you Jake Schaefer. There he is. We're ringing his phone even as we speak. Hello? There you are, Jake. Stay right there. We'll be with you in a moment. Jake Schaefer is, of course, he's a producer on our program, develops bits, does sports, one of the creative people in our background. But first, let me tell you why he is with us. Today, we used our spinner last week. We have our own little device where in fact, he doesn't pick the games now. It's like a bizarre spinner, and it decides what games he gets stuck having to handicap. Now, he has a good record. He's going to tell you his record in a moment, but we remind you that Jake's Picks of the Week are brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars, located in Larchmont on Boston Post Road. They've got a great selection of cigars, padrones, and so forth. They're right here in Boston Post Road. They're open 7 days a week. And Jake showed me a cigar last week. I think it cost like $15. And actually, it smelled really good. But what do I know? Anyway, without further ado, please welcome Jake Schaefer. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning, Bob.
I'm
afraid to show my face.
I know.
This
Well, today, as you know, we're doing one of our a full show, of course, but also testing our remote capabilities. And Jake is now Jake has come to me many times and said, so we can share this with him, Jake. Hey, Bob, if we want to take the show, can we do it? And I say, yes, we'll be testing that soon. If we want to go to some dealership and do the show, yeah, absolutely. And Jake, the test is going extremely well. So you'll be glad to know that. And we'll be adding video as well, but everything is working fine here. So as Jake continues to talk with potential sponsors, he continues to lose bets. Now, Jake, let's move forward because one of our sponsors, and we're very proud to have them, are our friends over at Dominic's Cigars. And they want to hear from you. Your public wants to hear from you. What's your record right now?
Well, Bob, I'm coming to you from Guam. How am I coming in? Am I all right? I'm afraid to. Coming in all right?
Okay, go ahead. You're coming to me from Guam. Okay, let's go game by game.
Yeah, well, I picked the Seattle Seahawks. It was a pick'em game against the Rams, and the Rams blew them out pretty good last night. It was 28-12. Lost that one by 16 points, and my beloved Bills, they were 5.5 point underdogs against the Ravens. They gave them a good one, and they kind of might have drew up a blueprint on how to defend that exciting Ravens quarterback, but they lost 24-17. They lost by 7. I got 5.5. Didn't quite pull that one off either, but I do have Eli and the Giants going tonight, and I have 9.5 points. So
now you have 9.5 points. What is
not all is lost, Bob?
What is your record right now? Your total record?
That is 17-14-1. We are just going to inch to the finish line. As long as I get over the 500 mark, I will be happy, content, So I'm just gonna pick maybe one game a weekend.
No. Our friends at Dominic's Fine Cigars do not want one game. Do you think they're laying out good money for you to shrivel up and shrink? No, sir, Jake. 4 games a week.
Bob,
That's
I can't show my face in public anymore.
well, we'll have to turn them. Well,
Going out in sunglasses and.
Well, we're going to be doing new camera blocking at the home studio, so they will see a lot more of your face, and it's not even Halloween.
Yeah,
so.
that's exactly what the radio stations need. You, myself, and Chris on camera. That's a great idea.
It's not
Broadcasting genius right there.
It's not a pretty sight.
No, that's probably the worst.
But you know what, though? You've added so much.
For a few years.
But don't you see the sympathy you'll get when you, like, one day, like 4 weeks from now, when you're 18 and 24, and you're stringing a rope up outside the train station. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I did want to ask you about a few sports stories while we have you. But again, Jake's picks of the week, which have not gone well, but he's got one more. He's got the Giants tonight with 9 points. Brought to you by
9.5.
9.5. Thank you, Dominic's Fine Cigars and Padron's wonderful, great cigars over there. They're located over on Boston Post Road. They're open 7 days a week. And now you smoke their cigars. You should give them a little plug because you handed me a cigar. You told me how much it was, and then I ran. But good cigars are not cheap. But tell me what kinds of cigar. What are your favorites?
I'm a big fan of their Padrones. They just make very fine cigars.
Do they? Tell me now.
I know you're not I know you can't. It's not in your dietary.
No, actually,
maybe once a year.
Jake, I would like a cigar would be a good thing, but I was a very admitted cigarette addict. I mean, I actually will admit that I am a cigarette addict through and through. I smoked 3 packs a day for 10 years. And I was one of those people that used to light the next cigarette with the last one. And that's the only reason I'm afraid of cigars, because you don't inhale them. And then one day, I was only 27 years old. I was getting up off the floor after playing with my niece, who's now 40-something, which tells you how long ago it was. And I said, I just can't do this anymore. Hardest thing I ever did. And I know deep in my soul that if I was told I had a month to live, I'd probably buy a pack of Newport. It's just I know I'm an addict, so that's that. But we'll move on from that. I want to have some fun.
Were you one of the guys? Were you one of the guys that would actually wear like a white T-shirt and take your pack of cigarettes and just roll it right up in your sleeve?
No. I was your basic.
I could picture that one.
No, thank you. No,
I could picture that one.
I was your basic workaholic that always had a cigarette. In fact, most interestingly, now you have to go back 40 years. It would be hard for young people to imagine this, but everybody smoked. You smoked in elevators. You smoked at work. And I had lit a cigarette in a meeting, and then I went to scratch my hair, and I didn't realize the match was, I set my hair on fire. But I'll tell you how bad I was. I was one of those people that if in the middle of the night I ran out of cigarettes, I would go around to the ashtrays, I would empty out what tobacco was there, and then I would roll it in a piece of toilet paper and hope that I could
there you
smoke
go.
it. Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. That's some good stuff there.
All right, I got stuff I want you to talk about. A lot of stories over the weekend about Eli Manning coming back, et cetera, et cetera. What say you? If he plays well, it's not going to make any difference, is it? Do you think?
Well, what I was thinking was he was going to go to Denver and do exactly like his brother did and get to a Super Bowl or two, and run that team, have a nice defense, and make it to the Super Bowl. But it looks like Denver has a nice young quarterback. I don't know. What is Eli Manning going to do? What team needs a veteran quarterback? The Bears. Bears quarterback had a great game against the Cowboys.
What did you think of my man Mahomes yesterday? So glad that he beat. That's one of the few things I follow. Beat Green Bay.
Did you see the officials in that game?
No, I did not.
Never seen anything like that before.
Why? What did they do?
There's gonna be hell to pay. You can't do that against Belichick and the Patriots.
Tell me what they did.
Dreadful calls that the Patriots had to waste challenges, and then they got to the point where they didn't have a challenge on an obvious touchdown, and it was pretty dreadful. And there's going to be a lot of fallout this week and in the weeks to come. And you can't do that one to Belichick and Brady. You cannot do that to them.
Well, you shouldn't do it to anybody. But isn't there a larger issue here? We see in hockey, they had to change the rules twice now in 2 years because of bad calls in the playoffs. Baseball has it. They want to automate strikes. Is it possible, and I'm asking you this because you follow it more closely than I, is it possible that all of the technology we have to see things, is it possible that refs have always made these mistakes? We just didn't catch them before, and maybe what is needed is an eye in the sky to overrule refs.
Well, I just look at it today, and for cripe's sakes, it's like, Bob, it's like you're in an official's jersey. It's you, the men are your age, and they are making these calls, and they're split second, inch by inch calls. And maybe, I don't know, I don't know. With age and experience, maybe you get better, but it just seems like the game is so fast.
Well, that's true.
And I can't tell the calls until I see the slow motion instant replay.
That's my point. Why not have an eye in the sky who gets to review the calls and verifies them? Maybe they need to add that step. And I got the age appropriate joke. I will sue you tomorrow, by the way. I'm politically correct.
But does that make it fun? Isn't there kind of a I don't know, if you just make it all robotic, does it make it
I agree with you, but I think balls and strikes should be robotic. But no, it's probably not as fun. But then again, look at what you're saying. We saw in hockey.
I got a kick out of the Patriots game last night. It was the late game, and it wasn't the night game. It was the 4:00 game. But I just got a kick out of it. I wasn't rooting for the Patriots, but they had these two terrible calls against them, and I was getting a kick out of it just because that never happens to the Patriots. So it was must-watch TV. But
they're still the greatest team in football.
It was terrible officiating.
Well, see, now that's where you're caught in that great debate. It was great TV, but it was terrible officiating. Again, I submit that there needs to be something done. One of the things that I've coached basketball. One of the little dark secrets I have. It's on a pretty high level back in the day. And one of the things about basketball is I do not know how the refs make those calls. In fact, I've never watched a modern game where they let go traveling a lot. It was called much more strictly, particularly if it's a big guy coming down the floor and he can't stop himself. They travel all the time. But again, to be fair, I don't know how basketball referees do it. They don't pay them enough. Did he hit his hand? Did he hit the ball? Was it an offensive foul? It's tough. All right. Speaking of that, I want to go on to another topic with you before I let you go. We have a special guest coming up in about 9 minutes, running for the U.S. Congress. What do you think about the Knicks debacle? All of a sudden, Jeff Van Gundy is on everybody's short list. But you're not going to get a guy of his caliber unless he's allowed to run the team properly. But then again, we said the same thing about Phil Jackson. What say you?
No, I can't see that happening. But
why? Because you don't.
That'd be great, but he would never come. And I mean, he used to. I assume Dolan was the owner when Van Gundy was here.
Yes.
God, how long ago was he?
The 2000. He was a good coach.
No, he's great.
More famous. Remember when he tried to help out in the fight? He had that guy's leg. He looked like a Sherpa at the foot of a mountain. He grabbed the guy's leg in the fight.
Alonzo Mourning. But it's exactly like baseball. What kind of coach do you want to have? They just want puppets. I would just want
They're gonna keep losing.
That's why I was excited about Phil Jackson, but he wasn't a puppet. He was just a mummy. He was
what happened?
There to collect his checks.
He was past his sell-by date. I think that's fair. In that case, it is 8:11. We are talking with our sports handicapper and sports guy, and one of our creative producers. and a funny guy. He's actually has been a stand-up comedian for many, many years. Jake Schaefer. Another story I wanted to go to, one of your favorite stories, and in fact, I wanted to know if you have a Francesa fact of the day. He retired on Friday, but there's this sense that he's not really going away. That he's
no, it seems like he's going to do a half hour on WFAN every day, and he's going to be on the radio or the radio.com.
He's going to do he's going to try and do what we're doing.
Yeah, and it seems like he wants to veer a little bit into politics and mix politics with sports, which should be interesting, I guess. And he's got the Adam Sandler movie coming out in a couple of weeks.
How is he in that? What is he in that movie?
I already got our tickets for.
What? Oh, you do. What is that all about? I heard him say that, and of course Bob Raisman, who beats the living daylights out of him. What is that movie about?
I think it's about a jeweler who feeds professional athletes with his. What do the kids call it now? They call it the bling. Is that what the kids call it?
Oh yeah, bling. Yeah,
it's about a jeweler. Adam Sandler is a jeweler, and Mike Francesa is his bookmaker. And I believe Mike Francesa is in the movie for a grand total of maybe 7 seconds. About 7 or 8
but
seconds.
He's in the
whole movie.
It's still pretty cool. It's funny, Mike.
But he was featured in the trailer, which is
as a fan of
nice
his,
little
as a
for him.
as a fan of his, because I've always liked him, even when I didn't like him, if you know what I mean. And he even says and admits to mailing it in the last few years. But is he just saying not to placate his critics, or do you think that's true, that he was mailing it in?
Well, he has to come up with an excuse. You know what he's like. He didn't have ratings, so whatever excuse he can come up with. I don't think his ratings were very good the last couple of years.
Okay, one more question.
Still the greatest, though.
I agree with you.
The New York sports pope.
No, he is, and I got to tell you, he turned me into a fan of people that sometimes that he liked and others that he didn't. I told you the story. He spent one day, I am driving down from Northern Connecticut. I'm meeting with my accountant. I happen to be in Connecticut. It's a long story. Anyway, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe 7 now. Time flies when you get old. And he spent an entire show beating Daniel Murphy with a club. And I said, and I was following the Mets kind of, peripherally. And I said, let me take a look at this guy and watch him play. And it was right when all of a sudden his career took off, when he hit everything that was thrown to him. Boy, he could get on
a 400 hitter.
Yeah, he could get on a guy's case and never stop. And then of course, ultimately he had that incredible postseason where you couldn't get the baseball by him. But all right, one more thing before I let you go. And Jake Wisdom, we should call it. What a dichotomy is it?
I like that a lot.
I knew you would. What a dichotomy is it, Jake? The way they let the Rangers rebuild, and now we're starting to see the fruits of it. They're going to have issues because they're very young, but we see all these young stars, steady management. Do you think it's because, like a lot of New Yorkers, they think they know basketball and they delve where they shouldn't, whereas hockey, they're not sure, so they leave it alone? That's my take. What's yours?
Well, where's the pressure? When's the last time you saw the GD Rangers on the back, the front back of the New York Post? Who cares? Let them do whatever they want.
No, actually, no. No, when they hired John Davidson, that was a big deal. When they fired the previous coach, the Rangers make money every year. I mean, the Knicks are the Knicks. They're an icon in basketball, but the Rangers make money.
No, I'm just talking about who. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but
I know
even
you
so,
like hockey, but
no, but
honestly,
even so,
who cares? When's the last time?
Okay,
they were on the front page of any paper?
Well, they've been on the front. When they got Panarin made the front page, Jake. So says the man who's been losing football games.
That was in the Carter administration?
They did win a cup, in 94. Just saying. And but seriously,
okay. Was that
even if it's
yeah.
but even if that's your answer, Mr. Snarky, even if that's your answer, maybe there's something to it. Maybe hiring a basketball guy like Van Gundy and letting him do well, they just brought in John Davidson, but this new GM who they've had since Sather moved upstairs, he was allowed to draft and make all these decisions. Anyway, thank you very much.
No one cares about the Rangers.
You know,
the Knicks are fun to beat up on.
Folks, he's doing this just to animate me.
And then it's fun to beat up on the Giants and the Jets. No one cares about the Rangers.
It's fun.
And whatever.
No, it's fun.
Whatever local hockey teams you can.
It's fun for you to beat up me. It's fun
for
Jake.
A nice head of hair you got there.
It's fun for Jake. Oh, I take back all the compliments I gave him at the top. He's miserable. He has no creative ideas. He's as funny as a disease.
It was a rough weekend. I can't show my face at Dominic's Fine Cigars.
Well, listen,
for at least 2 weeks.
Jake Schaefer, thank you very much. And Jake's Picks brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars. You know he smokes Padrons himself. They've got Padrons, another selection. A great selection. They're open 7 days a week. They're right over here in Larchmont of Boston Post Road. Folks, go to them. Tell them you heard it here. I don't know. We got to ask them if they give discounts when they do that. We should do that. We should add that, Jake, with all your creative wisdom. Hey, Jake, great job. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. Jake Schaefer, everybody. Let's look straight ahead. And who's coming up straight ahead? We're going to talk with is he on already? No, I don't think so. But a couple of minutes, we are going to talk with. I just recognized a phone number. I'm going to get abused, but that'll happen in a little while because we do have to go to the weather. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by our friends at United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And if you're ever interested, just take a walk over there. You could eat off the floors when you go in that place, and you could in the lobby. And then when you pull up, even if you want to go for a meeting, they park your car. You're not driving all around the park. And the staff there is wonderful, particularly Rita Mabley, who's been running it successfully for so many years. So thank you for your support of our weather. Did I say traffic? I do that from time to time. And we will be doing traffic from time to time. But first, it's 42 and overcast, windy with periods of rain. It's going to get up to about 55 today, but the rain will be off and on. Now, tonight, mostly cloudy, scattered showers, 55 degrees. Tomorrow, cloudy with rain late in the day, 61. Yes, you heard me right. Bob, are you correct? Yes, 61 degrees until Wednesday. Then the temperature drops like a rock. We'll have some snow, early snow on Wednesday. 36, the average during the day, getting down to 24 at night. And the sun makes its return on Thursday with a high of 32. And as we go into the top of the hour, that is supported by Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne & Con, Virtual Reality, and Dominic's Fine Cigars. Now, we will be talking in a moment, and unless they're on the line now. Nope, yeah, there we go. Do-dee, da-da-da. I'm sorry about that. I just had a hiccup with the mic. I banged into it, but I'm here. Our next guest is on the line. Now, many of you know David Buchwald. He's been your assemblyman for several years now. He also does work with Nita Lowy. And by most people's estimates, this individual is highly regarded by everyone we talk to. Now, we haven't spent a lot of time in his district because over the years, I've been doing mostly down county stuff, except for when I was on WFAS for a few years. He also does work for Nita Lowy. I don't know if he writes speeches or administration, but he now is who many believe to be the leading candidate for the Senate seat, the congressional seat being vacated by Nita Lowy upon our retirement. Please welcome David Buchwald. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bob. How are you? And you are very kind. First in already giving me credit in this congressional race, but also giving me more credit than is due vis-a-vis Congresswoman Lowy. I interned for her 22 years ago.
22?
I'm very proud of that.
22 years ago?
Yes, amazingly. It was one of the reasons that I was inspired to get involved in public service was seeing Congressman Lowy being determined and making a difference for the people of the Lower Hudson Valley. But of course, for the last 7 years, I've had the honor of being a state assembly member,
Yes.
Representing constituents together, and of course representing the Congresswoman herself as a resident of Harrison.
Right. So you don't exactly do any work for her now beyond when you were an intern. Okay.
We work together.
That's
our
what I thought.
offices,
Yes.
Are solving issues for constituents all the time, and she has a great able staff, and together with my small underpaid staff, we thankfully are problem solvers together, and it's always a pleasure to work with her, but in our dual capacity as representatives of people here in Westchester.
Well, you've raised a good point. Once again, David Buchwald, he's a candidate for the congressional seat being vacated when Nita Lowy takes a well-earned retirement. She's a committee chair, a very important committee that she chairs. I'm sure if you're elected, you won't get that job right away. But you're an interesting man, and one of the questions I was going to ask you about, and you volunteered it. When you were interning for her, were you already interested in getting into politics, or did you get the bug then?
I was interested in public service. But I was actually a budding physics major at the time in
really?
college, and therefore I was, if anything, focused on maybe science policy and innovation and technology. But I got to see Congresswoman Lowy and her Washington, D.C. staff in action. She's played a very small role in promoting a initiative she championed, which was to lower the blood alcohol content required for DWI across the country to 0.08, an initiative that a few years later became law, and I therefore very firmly believe that Congressman Lowy has saved lives in this country, and we all owe her a debt of gratitude for that, amongst many accomplishments. But I went to later on to both public policy and law school, so the concept of working in government it certainly appealed to me. But if you told me 22 years ago that I would be running to succeed Congressman Lowy in Congress, I wouldn't have believed you. But
well, good for
thankfully, things have gone well since then. About 10 years ago, some folks approached me, would I be interested in running for the White Plains Common Council, our city council? And thankfully, I thought about it for about 2 seconds and said yes. And ever since, I've had the privilege of serving constituents and working to solve their problems.
Yeah, I remember when you ran for the assembly. I want to back up to two things. Again, we're talking with David Buchwald. He is a sitting New York State Assemblyman now, but he is running. He will be in the primary for the congressional seat being vacated by the aforementioned very successful Nita Lowy. This just for my own edification. Do you still dabble in the sciences, the Higgs boson and all that stuff? Do you still love that stuff?
I never became a practicing
physicist.
I worked in economics coming out of college. Then, as I mentioned, public policy and law school. I was a practicing tax attorney for 6 years before entering the assembly, and I gave up my personal practice at that time.
Okay,
but the problem-solving skills of physics have moved throughout my career. As I said, whether you solve problems through formulas or by taking on government bureaucracies on behalf of people we represent.
Well, yeah,
it's all about problem solving.
This is what I was getting to, because and we'll move on to your background. We have plenty of time, and I want people to get to know you, Assemblyman Buchwald. But your background, both first in science and then in tax law, and as a lawyer, and working in these different positions, Common Council in White Plains, your association with Ms. Lowy, something like global warming or the climate, using that scientific approach must drive you nuts.
Well, look, first of all, less in New York, because in New York we just passed the Community Leadership and Climate Protection Act, the strongest anti-global warming initiative in the country, and I was a co-sponsor of that. So my frustration is less with my colleagues in this great state because we're actually leading the country on that effort.
But nationally,
absolutely, the fact that we've been derelict in our duty on that front, on combating gun violence, on a whole host of issues where science and studies show there are real areas we can make an improvement, and the vast majority of Americans want us to tackle these issues. It is not a question of what does the science say is the right way to approach things. It is a question of, do we have the political will? And I've always been someone willing to take on a fight on behalf of people I represent, and thankfully use my background skills to inform colleagues and persuade the public.
well, let's take. Thank you for that. Let's roll the camera back, if we may, and go back to where'd you grow up, and how did you decide to get into politics in the first place?
Sure. So I grew up in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, graduate of Mamaroneck Public Schools, Mamaroneck High School. But my whole family now lives in White Plains. My parents, sister, brother-in-law, niece, nephew, and my wife, and our two
You
little
brought
girls.
everybody.
Go
ahead.
Well, yeah. Well, we love White Plains. We think it's a fantastic community to raise a family and to prosper. And thankfully, it a few years ago was the fastest growing city in the state of New York. So it's appealed to lots of folks. But that's the hometown pride I have in my new adopted hometown.
Kind of nice. Where'd you go to school?
Both my
No. Continue, please.
well, yeah. So, well, in any case, I was always instilled by my parents, who are both former assistant U.S. attorneys. My mother's a federal judge, to get involved in my community, and whether it's my school community. And to answer your question, after Mamaroneck Public Schools, I went to Yale for college, and later on
Couldn't get into
Harvard,
a good
both, law school.
Couldn't get into a good school, huh? Jeez, wow. I'm glad you made it.
I appreciate the fact that public education here in Westchester prepared me for a whole host of opportunities that were ahead. And one of the things I'm very committed to is making sure that every child who grows up in the Lower Hudson Valley has opportunities to succeed and thrive. And, that's one of the things that we have to be very focused on. And then, so when, I came to White Plains and really got settled here after graduate school, I made sure that one way or another I was going to be involved in my community, whether it's local neighborhood association or local volunteer work, serving on the board of trustees of the White Plains Historical Society. It was just a natural extension of I was raised to be, and then I started going to local meetings of my local Democratic Party and campaigning on behalf of others. And
it's one thing
led to another, and
Assemblyman Buchwald. It's one
Go ahead.
thing. No, we're talking with David Buchwald. He's the assemblyman, as you know, in northern Westchester, now running for the seat, actually primarying for the Nita Lowey seat in the Congress of the United States. Now, I ask this of everyone, but I usually ask it earlier on, but given the fact that you've had a few jobs already, I figured I'd wait. Go back to the first time you decided to run. Why did you want to do this to yourself, and why do you want to do it again? It's tough. Running is tough. You wear out shoes, you get abused. Why?
Well, a few different things. First, the initially running for our city council in White Plains, and that was an extension of being involved in the White Plains community, as I laid out. But then I also faced the decision leading up to 2012. We were represented in this state assembly district by a Tea Party Republican whose views were out of step with Westchester values. And no other elected Democrat was up for taking him on. He'd already defeated Tom Roach and Pete
Yes.
Harckham, two very accomplished Democrats who have gone on to do great things. Well before I thought anything like that would be in the cards, it was I viewed it as my responsibility to step up to the plate, and thankfully the voters saw fit to elect me in 2012 by a 9-point margin over a sitting incumbent, and that's just pretty rare in New York.
No, it is
For
commendable.
either
Absolutely.
party to be defeated.
And in that district.
This is a district that a few years ago, of the 9 towns here in northern central Westchester that represent, only 2 of them had majority Democratic town boards. As of this upcoming January 1st, it would be 7 of 9. And I'm proud of that fact, recognizing that my leadership on behalf of the Democratic Party is a small portion of that. It was really as much great candidates in local Democratic committees, as well as the man in the White House who were responsible for a shift in the tide here in particularly northern Westchester. Last year I was reelected with a 40-point margin, and I'm honored that support has come across the Democratic Party, but also beyond the Democratic Party to help convey that I am, a representative of the district who tries to take into account good ideas and be a strong voice for the district. If need be, taking on Albany as necessary to get the work done that people sent me to do.
We're talking with David Buchwald. He is running. He's a sitting assemblyman, as you can hear. He's running for in the primary, of course, for the congressional seat that will be vacated by Nita Lowey when she retires. Now let's focus on the current day and what you have in front of you. Why do you want this particular job? What will be your priorities? And of course, Nita Lowey has a legacy. She has policies. I'm sure you agree with. You work with her closely, but you, of course, will be your own man as well. What are you most concerned about? Why do you want to be in the Congress of the United States?
Well, I view this as a crucial time in our country. When I went to Albany was the most dysfunctional legislature in the country. Now it's pretty clear Washington has taken that mantle. With so many topics where we've made progress at state level, but hardly any progress at the national level, whether that's global warming, gun violence, or protecting women's reproductive rights, or more generally dealing with the environment or needs of working men and women in this country. We are too often at a standstill in D.C., and I think both my record of success and the collective record of success we've had in state government, especially over this last year, is something that we need a strong fighter who can hit the ground running in D.C., and that's what the 17th Congressional District needs.
Wow. I'm going to do what I do with a lot of different elected officials. I'm in the booth, okay? It's primary time, and I've got this list. I think a whole bunch of people are jumping into it. We've already spoken with Ms. One of the 2 of the candidates already. Mondaire Jones among them, the first of y'all. We've heard David Carlucci's in the race, et cetera. I'm in that primary booth. Why do I want to pull the lever for David Buchwald?
Okay, I think at its heart, I'm someone with a proven record of success fighting for progressive values. When I talk about taking on Donald Trump and Washington Republicans, it's not just rhetoric. It's something I've already done. I've already helped lead the charge and change the laws here in New York State to address the cap on the SALT deduction. I put forward legislation to address climate change as a co-sponsor, as I mentioned, something that D.C. hasn't tackled. my first vote in the New York State Assembly on a piece of legislation was for the New York SAFE Act, the strongest anti-gun violence legislation. I was co-sponsor of that bill and many others since then that we've enacted, while D.C. has done hardly anything. And Trump administration has certainly been a part of blocking progress on that while it's ever more needed. I put forward a piece of legislation to provide transparency of tax returns to top government officials, a law that New York is now being sued by Donald Trump over. And that's, using my existing role as a state assemblyman to actually effectuate change. I appreciate the fact that there are other candidates who'd like to start on that journey, but ultimately, I think voters will say there's been someone already fighting the good fight on this front and many others, and that's exactly what you'll need in a first-term member of Congress who, already demonstrated enough say in the first term of the state assembly that we could really get things done, and that's what I've been doing ever since now, over, getting close to 70 bills enacted into law in 7 years in the state assembly.
David Buchwald, our guest,
just my own personal.
As he said, he's state assemblyman now, was in the Common Council in White Plains, now running for that congressional seat. I skipped over one of my questions, so forgive me if I go back in time. But what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? I know you have a family. What are your hobbies in terms
Sure.
What do you do to relax?
As a father of a 4.5-year-old and 2.5-year-old.
Oh my God! You didn't tell us that.
Into their,
I didn't get their ages.
So, for what it's worth, last weekend, Frozen 2 was the main agenda item for the family. But beyond that, maybe some of the pre-existing interests. I'm a big Mets fan. My wife
sorry.
and I, we're in a mixed marriage. You're okay, Bob, because I married into a Yankees family.
No, you did not.
My wife's original.
Go ahead.
I absolutely did. We agreed that girls would be raised to love baseball, and then they'll choose their favorite team from there. But to show you the level of seriousness of my wife's family, my wife's original middle name was just the letter M, short for Mickey Mantle.
Oh, geez. Oh, man.
I recognize that, thankfully, my wife Lara has been tremendously supportive in this effort, like so many other things.
Oh,
and
sure.
So
I
couldn't possibly do this without them.
We always have fun with all the Met fans coming on. I don't know if you probably know him, but Chuck Strom, the city manager here in New Rochelle, is a Met fan. And although he's also an Eagles fan, so we don't always have a good time on the air. But it's been rough being a Mets fan. What do you think of the new ownership idea, sir? These other people with the Coens.
I personally am excited about the opportunity for a new approach to our team. We had a very exciting year this past year. Frankly, it looked like there was going to be a point where the year would be another washout, but we've got a number of great young players and maybe an infusion of new leadership in the Mets organization will spur us to ever greater heights.
I should be working on your campaign. I would tell people, do you want to know his ability to cross the aisle? Have you any idea that he's married to a woman whose middle name is after Mickey Mantle? He's a Met fan. You that talk about reaching out across the aisle, Assemblyman. God.
We thankfully have so many other things in common that we can agree to disagree on a few issues, and thankfully. You can also point to my legislative record where I've been pushing for things like ethics in government and open government.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Initiatives to make government work better on people's behalf. And those are not partisan issues. And, pleased to work with colleagues on both sides if their interest is in improving things in our state government, then never refuse
David Buchwald,
their ability to sign on to one of my bills.
Before I let you go, and again, David Buchwald, Assemblyman, now running in the primary for the congressional seat being vacated by Nita Lowy. Because this is a thing of mine, I've got to give your staff or whomever's running your campaign a compliment. woe be, and this is just, we all have who do this for a living. Woe be to the candidate who makes it hard for us to get a hold of them, because we've got some people run for office. They don't give us a phone number, an email. We're supposed to divine how to get a hold of them. Your campaign is so efficient. It was easy to get a hold of you and get a commitment, even in short term. And that's no small thing. I'm always telling people when they're my own rants that I go on is if they don't give me, if I can't get a hold of them now, what are they going to do when I have a problem? And so, and I try never to use like an inside, which I have many angles because I want to see how well their campaign behaves. You've got whoever's running it for you, pat them on the back. This has been an easy thing and a fluid thing to get a hold of. And if that's any sign of how you work, well, good for you. Just had to say that.
Well, thank you very much for saying so, Bob. I'll gladly pass along and let all your listeners know. They can always go to davidbuchwaldforcongress.com. That's DavidBuchwaldForCongress.com. And they can find me on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll be on Instagram pretty soon too. And this will be a campaign where we treat voters and constituents as if they're my bosses or prospective bosses. And if your boss contacts you, or if a member of the press who represents the public contacts you, you've got a duty to get back to them. That's what we do in both my assembly office and the congressional campaign.
I wouldn't bring it up if I haven't had some days where I pulled out my hair. And a credit to your organization. We're not showing any favorites. That's just a fact. And again, people listening know that I'm very tolerant of a lot of stuff. I'm an easygoing guy, but I'll say to myself, look, they want me to fill out a whole form just to get back to me. And I'll say, boy, all right, I'll be telling that on the air. So if I'm going to beat them up when I have to give credit where credit is due. So listen, good luck to you. We'd love to have you back pretty regularly. We'll get all the candidates on, and as the field narrows down, maybe we'll even have a debate. But I wish you the very best, Assemblyman Buchwald, in your endeavor. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Bob. Primary is June 23rd. Early voting begins June 13th. So we've got plenty of time. Look forward to being on the air again.
Well, we'll be talking with you. David Buchwald, everyone. And you all who listen to this program regularly know how I feel about that. I've had candidates in some pretty serious positions, and you can't make it up what will happen. These people, some of them, they actually make you fill out a form like a bad customer service thing, and they only want to get back to you if you're really important or can help them, I suspect, or not. But one of the things I've always shared with you is to infer, if they're hard to get a hold of now, wait till they're in office. And well, the gold standard that way is Paul Feiner, whose car. Now, if you don't live in Greenberg and you don't see Paul Feiner drive around, you don't know this. But Paul actually has like a pizza kiosk on his car with his phone number on it. And it says, I am the supervisor of Greenberg. And it doesn't get better than that. And at any rate, David Buchwald, thank you very much. We've also had on 2 other candidates. We'll get more on. Now, I heard a rumor, and if it's true, we're going to have a lot of fun, that Richard Brodsky may be throwing himself into the race. And never have I been treated so coarsely by an elected official as he. Now, I have to forgive him. It happened 9 years ago, but still, I don't forgive easy. All right, at least when I'm treated badly, and I was in that case. We're going to take a quick break. We've got a caller who's been trying to get in, but we have a lot of guests today. We're going to talk with that caller. There he is, and I hope he answers the phone. All right, he is there. We'll be right with you, caller, but first, we need to go to the traffic. Not the traffic. We're not doing the traffic. By the way, we've been debating. We've decided to include the traffic now. We were not going to do traffic because we're here at the train station, but our sense is that you want that anyway, not just the train schedules that we'll post outside. So we are working to include that, and that's going to happen very, very quickly. So let's go to the weather. It's 42 right now. It's overcast, windy with periods of rain, as you can see, but the temperature is pretty high, about 55. Tonight, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. 55 again tomorrow. Get out the bathing suits, Mitch. Cloudy with rain late in the day. 61. I can see Mitch out on his porch now in a Speedo, or not, because he'll have to take it off quickly, but not no, replace it with something warm, because on Wednesday we have snow early in the day. Then it'll be cloudy, 36, and at night getting down to a chilly 22. Don't worry, the sun comes back on Thursday, but it won't get much above 32 degrees. And the weather was brought to you exclusively by our friends at United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Mitchell, good morning.
Morning, Bobby. You're showing your age with Speedos.
I'm always showing my age, as long as I'm not showing anything else. Although we're only on doing a whole new test today, and we're very happy with it, to see if we can take the show on the road when we need to, and it's really working. So all of you across this great state, Albany, Buffalo, we're yours now, the United States, Florida. We're going to be in the space shuttle soon. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, just a couple of things. First, I heard you talking about how you were a 3-pack of cigarettes a day guy.
Yeah, I was.
I actually never smoked cigarettes directly, but growing up, I grew up with my mom and grandparents, so it was a combination of 11 packs a day I was inhaling.
Wow. Wow. So how long did you smoke? Or you didn't actually? You smoked there. It was secondhand smoke?
Yes, and the only one who smoked with the filter was my grandmother, who smoked Parliament. But my mom smoked Camel, and my grandfather smoked Lucky Strike.
Luckies were good, but we used to. Those were chest breakers, though. Oh my goodness, there's a tough cigarette. Oh my goodness. Now let me ask you this: did you ever think about smoking?
When I was 8 years old, I asked my mom if I could have a puff on Camel, and I coughed and choked for about a half hour and said, "This makes no sense at all," and that was it. I was done.
Wow. You are done. I'm going to tell you this very frankly, Mitchell. Had I kept smoking like that, not only would I not be playing hockey, I would not be on this microphone. I'm sure I would have been dead when I was 50, the way I was smoking. Lung cancer's taken many in my family.
Well, I'll tell you sort of a funny story. My aunt also was a big smoker, and one of the times that I rushed to the hospital in the emergency room, and the ER doctor says, "Do you smoke?" And my aunt said, "Yes." She says, "Well, how much?" And she says, "Well, maybe a pack a day." And I turned to her and said, "Elaine, he doesn't mean before you get out of bed. He means for the whole day."
Well, when you're addicted, you usually light a cigarette before your feet hit the floor, and then you have one burning while you're shaving.
No. My aunt was called a chain smoker. She never
So was
she
I.
needed one match for the entire day.
Yeah, you light the previous one. The only time you don't is
Right.
on the train, and anytime you have stress. In fact, full disclosure, the closest I've come to smoking in the last 42 years since I quit was when we were building the studio. Because I'm not technical, and dealing with the technical people just was so frustrating. They're geniuses. Like, you should see even this remote setup. Geniuses. But it would just the stress. I almost had a cigarette.
Yeah. Well, I heard you early this morning talking about what happened in New Rochelle and so forth, and I got to tell you something. I agree with you. I think that Ms. Trejo has every right to file a complaint, and I do believe that it is possible for a white person to be discriminated against, although very rare that it might be. I understand the flip side, where many African Americans are having trouble with it. And I think part of the problem that I find, and I knew this would happen, and I think it's been made worse by Donald Trump. I believe when Obama became president, was historical. Everybody looked at how great this is.
Uh-huh.
What I think the problem is that everybody assumed that now that we had a black president, I think many whites assumed, well, okay, we're no longer a racist state. This proves that we're no longer a racist country. And many blacks who were struggling up to then said, oh, this is salvation. Finally, we're going to have someone who understands our plight in the White House and going to make all these changes.
Mm-hmm.
It never was going to happen. Both of those were totally false. The fact that we elected an African American president did not mean that we were no longer a racist state. And one man, one woman, is not going to change 200 years.
Of course not. It has to evolve, but equally, understanding is a two-way street. If this woman was wronged, she has every right to pursue it. Yes, I understand why people of color would have a problem with it, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. I have problems with lots of things in life.
No, I understand. I think it's important for us to try to put ourselves in each other's shoes. It's not easy to
nuance,
do.
my friend. That's why I recognize
But,
totally. I understand why privilege. I told you my favorite line a million times was Chris Rock said it best when he said, white it's still better to be white in America. In the back of the theater, and I'm trying to imitate him, not as well though. In the back of the theater, there's probably some guy cleaning up with one leg and one eye, and making minimum wage, looking up at the stage at me and saying, nah, I'm going to stick with this white thing for a little while, and I'm rich. And he's absolutely right. But there's a difference between that and a backlash that says that a sense of urgency makes you a white supremacist. So every airline pilot and doctor and is now, you don't fix a problem by changing the rules of what competence is. That's not how you fix the problem. And it insults people of intellect, whether they be black, white, or purple.
Also, the problem on both sides of the fence.
Yes.
We read into what people, people can't speak anymore because every time they say something, we infer what they mean, what they're saying.
That's exactly
what
right.
Does it mean? And I was talking with someone today about Mimi Roker, who's thinking of running for DA.
Yes.
And the person I was talking to said, well, she's very well spoken. And I started cracking up. He said, what's so funny? I said, can't say that anymore. Because that's exactly what Bloomberg said about Kamala Harris. And it was taken, as to be offensive.
I deal with that every day.
Right. So, as I say, I think it's important that we try to put ourselves in. We try to put ourselves in everybody else's.
You're absolutely right, and that's what we try and do here. I stretch my brain to try and do that, as I know you do.
But I do know. I fully understand what many African Americans have trouble with this.
Oh yeah.
And I understand it, but but you know what? I think it's important, and I don't know how we get there, but I think it's important that we could have disagreements.
Do you know how we get there? One of the ways
we
have to get there, yeah, that's number one, and number two, to cut people a little slack, even if it's Mayor Bloomberg and what he says. It's not an insult to say someone's articulate, because you can't say they're articulate if they're black, because people assume that thinks you mean that black people aren't articulate. It doesn't necessarily mean that. People need to parse. They need to nuance.
Right. And I would say this. I have a lot of friends who disagree with me on this topic, and I feel very blessed that we could friends who are both black or white, and I feel blessed that I could talk with them honestly, and we discussed it, and we ended up disagreeing. We agreed to disagree, but they make some very strong and valid points, many which I agree with.
Yeah.
I just, at the end of the day, so it's one thing I love about New Rochelle. Look, we're having our diversity is a great strength, but it also brings with it great challenges.
Yeah.
And that's why it brings such great strength, because you got to get over these challenges. So look, I would prefer that this is not happening, but you know what? I'm proud of the people. I'm proud of New Rochelle and how they're handling it. I'm proud of the people who are bringing it to the forefront. They are sincere, great integrity. And whether we agree or disagree, I think it just, at the end of the day, is going to make our community better. But we will have some bumps in the road.
Oh, absolutely. And
And
and anyone that can be your friend, we already know is someone of great import. We don't want to lose that person. Listen, thank you very, very much. We're going to try. I think we didn't think we had him scheduled, but I recognized the number. I think it's Tom Abenantes. We're going to try and catch up with him. So thank you so very much, Mitchell. Great call.
You take it.
All right, take care. Let me see. And then at 5 in about 8 minutes or so, we will be talking with Bob Cox. Let me see why I missed this call. And we'll take it from there. Yeah, that's our system. I have to let you hear it, folks, until we silence it. It's one of the developing issues we have here at Radio Westchester. All right, hopefully they will call back. If they do not, we'll just reschedule them. We didn't speak with him last week, and my assumption was he wasn't coming back on. But let's take a look at what's coming up next, and have the story here under a cup of coffee. This is one of the good things about doing this remote test today, is that we're not on screen, and I can have coffee all over, and I didn't have to shave. It's fun. But one reminder that's important: you're listening to Radio Westchester. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. We are live each and every day from 6 to 10, and we are live on RadioWestchester.com, MyTuner Radio, and Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope, all of that. So did we just get another call from that? Let me try one more time. That's how we roll. But Bob Cox is coming up next. And nope, didn't work. But we tried. Okay. This is a story that Bob Cox did over the weekend, and we'll be talking with him soon enough. After signing controversial superintendent, former New Rochelle Board of Ed president joins anti-Fayhole movement. Now, Bob, as always, gets in great detail in his reports. Jeffrey Hasty, currently under investigation by the New Rochelle School District for fraud pertaining to thousands of dollars of unexplained telecommunications expenses, blah, 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 is now actively involved, according to this piece, in the anti-Fayhole movement. Although when challenged by Robert, as he was, pretty continuously, he never really confirmed it, and they got into a bit of a verbal duel. We'll let Bob tell you about that. He's been covering this issue in New Rochelle better than anyone else. In fact, many of the major press outlets have really piggybacked off Bob's stories, we hope with attribution. Let's take a look at some of the other headlines that we've been looking at all day for you before we go to our next guest, Bob Cox. A fire destroyed a Peekskill senior complex this morning. Just an absolute blaze. You could see it from miles around. Three alarms. The building's under construction. It was a senior center, and it's now burned to the ground. Just an incredible fire. 1847 Compound Road. So far, though, no one has been injured that we know of, because it was under construction. And other headlines today: New York to renew the flavored e-cigarette ban. Now, they already passed a law, but it, because of court challenges, has not yet been enforced. But nonetheless, it's going to expire soon. It was a temporary and emergency deal. So actually, we do have our guest on the line. It was an emergency deal. They want to institute the law. So we shall see how it goes. Good morning. You're on Radio Westchester.
Hi, Bob. How you doing? This is Vince.
Oh, Vince, it was you. Okay. I got about a minute. Bob Cox is coming on in about 2 or 3, but go ahead. What's on your mind?
Okay. Well, just starting the impeachment hearings, and I was looking through some media reports and this and that. And one of the things that I always take great interest in is that you can always tell when a news organization is really has an agenda or is faking news or whatever, when the person that they write about They never call to ask for their opinion. Or if the person does try to answer what is printed or said about them, they don't do it. So it really comes to separate true news organizations from just, I don't know what you would call them, but you see that sometimes.
But to your point, you should always call for comment. Now, sometimes they refuse, and so you go with the story if you have your sources. But if you don't have your sources,
That's right.
you shouldn't, and you
That's
better
right.
call it opinion.
That's right. And, honest news organizations always try to do that.
Yes.
Dishonest ones don't. And a lot of people don't see that sometimes. It becomes more of propaganda or political push rather than real news. But anyway, the hearings are about to start. But I did want to comment about the thing with on tomorrow. There's a public hearing at City Hall at 7:00 at night. Everybody in town who owns property, it looks like, you're going to be charged another fee.
Yep.
So maybe people should show up and say, "Hey, I already pay sewer tax." And there's no limit as to how high this fee can go.
Well, you're right. I asked the mayor about it the other day, by the way, and one of the things he said, and just before you go to that hearing, to keep in the back of your mind, it's just one point of view. I don't really understand the issue enough to say it. I just got to send a note out here. Let me just write this in 2 minutes. Here's what I wanted to say. He said that, if I got it right, that this is better to do it this way because people who are normally exempt from taxes, such as schools, certain non-tax exempt businesses and colleges, they too will have to pay.
Well, here's the one thing about that. If you read through the proposed legislation, basically, you're right. It's really for homeowners and hotels. It's based on how many hotel rooms. But commercial properties and large things like schools, Costco, it isn't by the square footage of the building. It's by how much acreage the land is.
Yeah, I see.
And each unit of a house or an apartment pays one separate fee. You could have a 2-acre property or bigger, like Costco. That's only 5 units. So if you have a small little 2-family house, you're paying 2 units. Costco is going to pay 5. Iona College, 5. School district in New Rochelle High School, 5. So basically, they're looking at this fee being based on not the square footage of commercial property or school buildings, but how much land it sits.
Stuff I didn't know. Oop, I lost you. You dropped, my friend. That's okay. We've got to get to our next guest anyway, but thank you very, very much for the call. I don't know why your call dropped, but we're going to talk with Bob Cox in just a moment. I do have to do one more quick look at the weather, and then we don't have to look at the weather right now. We do that in about 1 minute. First, we have to tell you the top of the hour is brought to you by Aging Issues Radio, Pena and Con Virtual Reality, and Dominic's Fine Cigars over at Larchmont Road. They have Padrons and many other terrific cigar brands. They're open 7 days a week, and they bring you Jake's Picks of the Week. As for the weather, it's 42 and overcast, windy with periods of rain, temperature 55. Tonight, mostly cloudy with scattered showers, 55 degrees. Tomorrow, cloudy, though, getting up to 61 degrees. Wednesday, snow, early cloudy, 36, down to 24. Thursday, the sun comes, high, 32. And that weather is brought to you by our friends at United Hebrew, brought to you exclusively by them, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. And let us go to our next guest. Now, we already told you that Bob Cox did a terrific story over the weekend, which I read with great interest regarding the former New Rochelle Board of Ed president, Mr. Jeffrey Hasty. He also has been covering the story of the superintendent and the issue with the football coach and whether or not he is working, or rather the district and he are working for some sort of a separation agreement. We mentioned him early with regard to this story. Please welcome once again the managing editor and the publisher of Talk of the Sound, Bob Cox. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Very well, and our remote package is working really, really well, I'm happy to say. Although,
So you can hear me okay?
absolutely. And I was impressed with this story, Bob, and it was, you gave, in fact, what you included in this story, which I really appreciated. You were very fair, bless you. You were very fair to your subject in that you went back and forth with him and you included that back and forth. Tell people about this story, and is it, in your estimation, do you really believe he's joined the anti-FAO movement? He kind of denied it or wouldn't confirm it. What say you?
Well, the one thing I know for sure is that people in the anti-FAHU movement have been telling me that he is involved, that they view him as an ally. And they told me this because, they were very excited, that he had joined their cause. So that's what I know for sure, is that these people believe it. But I tried to make clear also that, Hasty has a track record, including with me personally, of being sort of disingenuous, I would say, fancying himself as a double agent where he tries to associate himself with people who oppose something that's happening with the board, so that he can then filter information back to the board and let them know what the opposition is thinking. So that's why I genuinely don't know what his motivation is, whether it's sincere or not, but it's 100% the case that people in the movement view him as an ally.
Well, what's strange for those of us who don't follow it, unless we read Talk of the Sound as closely as you do, is he hired this woman. Why wouldn't he stick to his guns, at least even for the sake of argument, as Ms. Mazzelli has? What am I missing, and why does this Bosie's issue come up so powerfully in this story?
Well, I mean, I will tell you that, as of, the summer, when the anti-FAHU movement was really heating up over the lawsuit, he was a vigorous defender of what was his choice for superintendent. So I don't know what changed, except the first that I began hearing of his involvement with the anti-FAHU people revolved around the football coach. So it may be that that triggered something. I really don't know. And again, I don't even know if he's being sincere. I just know that it is certainly newsworthy if people that are opposing FAHU believe that the guy who hired her is now opposed to her. And if you look at Mr. Hasty's responses, well, first of all, I don't think that they're the responses of a serious-minded person.
They were obtuse.
That's being charitable, so that was nice of you. But the phrase idiotic comes to mind.
Well, the only thing I got is I don't know that I want to be in a foxhole with this gentleman, but I don't know him as well as you do, but it is unusual. If you would just take us back, what is the issue with Bosie's? And he was trying to sort of say, he was trying to distance himself. Now, I'm going to ask a tough question, and you love tough questions. Do you think he's trying to befriend these people to get off the hook for some of the things that he is now being pointed at himself?
Listen, I've known Jeffrey for a long time. I've dealt with him in the past, and I think you'd be losing money if you were ever try to bet on what you think he's really thinking. I don't know what he's really thinking. I just can sort of look at what the past has been. So I'd be, guessing, but of course you probably don't mind if I take a guess.
No.
I would guess that Hasty just enjoys being in the mix.
Okay.
And one way for him to be in the mix is to be going back and forth between his former board colleagues and people in the anti-Fay movement and relaying information back and forth and basically playing the role of either, you can call it double agent or triple agent, or you can just call it class clown gossip, whatever you want to call it.
The Alan
But,
Dershowitz
you know,
of New Rochelle, trying to stay relevant at any cost,
Well,
perhaps.
I don't know. All I know is this, is that if he's not involved, then there's a very simple answer, right? Which is no. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to share with your listeners one of my favorite books. It's called Spy the Lie. It's written by 3 retired CIA officers who had to develop a counterintelligence technique where they could check and see if a source, who was a secret agent, was in fact a double agent, but they couldn't strap him up to a polygraph, let's say at the Ritz Hotel in Cairo. So
Right.
they would have to use just conversation. So they developed a questioning technique that would help them identify double agents. And then they applied this to the corporate world, and they wrote a book, and they sell it as a consulting service. And it's very, very interesting. But one of the takeaways is that, you know, when you get down to interviewing somebody, at some point in the conversation, you ask them the direct question, you know, are you working for the Russians?
Right.
And an honest person will give a very simple answer, no. A dishonest person will give a long, rambling, incoherent answer that tries to draw your attention away from the question.
It sounds like the
And that's how I would
hearings.
characterize- Well, it is how I would characterize Jeffrey Hasty's response on Twitter, because there's a very simple answer. Are you involved with the anti-FAO people? No. And instead, he goes on and quotes Lewis Carroll, and he makes various wisecracks and, you know, tries to basically attack me as
Yes.
the person asking the question. But at no point does he ever just simply say, no, I'm not involved.
Yeah,
in
that was
No,
my point
or-
when I did the tease that after I read the
and more
story.
to
Yeah.
the point, what the correct answer is, if he believes it, is no, I'm not involved. I fully support Dr. Feo. I think she's a great hire. He didn't say any of that. So I think it's reasonable to conclude that the reason he's not giving a direct answer is because he doesn't have one.
Now, where do we go from here with this, Bob? And in fact, before we even, maybe I should postpone that question. My guest is Bob Cox. He's the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound. Consider the source since 2008, and you're learning why. Is there anything new on the front regarding, it was more than speculation. You were pretty comfortable that perhaps they were working on a separation agreement, that is the coach with the district. Any news on that?
Well, since the board meeting last week where the board voted to authorize the signing of the settlement agreement, no, there hasn't been any statement from either side. So I guess we're not going to get a statement. And I go back to what I said on your air several times. If you're expecting the Mueller report, you're going to be disappointed that this is going to end with a whimper, not a bang. And I think that, you know, has proven correct. Not that I'm some kind of mind reader. It's just that I've been doing this for 12 years. And when they do separation agreements, they typically don't put out a statement. This case appears to be no different. Now, we will ultimately get information.
Yes.
And when I get it, I will publish it, which is that the separation agreement itself is a public document. I immediately filed for freedom of information request to obtain it.
Uh-huh.
And when I obtain it, I will publish it, and everybody who wants to read it can read it. In my view, they should just simply publish it themselves because it's a public record. However, when you read these things, they have 2 relevant clauses to the media. One is a non-disparagement clause. So neither side can say anything bad about the other. Sometimes there'll be an appendix that will say, these are the 4 corners of what we agree we can say, right? So it's really for purposes of the person's next employer. This person worked here for 20 years. This person did a good job with X, Y, and Z. It's some kind of, you know, thing that they can say about the person or to the press. So there may or may not be an appendix to this particular one. The second would be a confidentiality clause. And that's kind of ironic because although it says it's confidential, of course, it isn't confidential because it's an expenditure of taxpayer money, and any document that's about expending taxpayer money is public.
Yeah, yeah. Bob, when
we'll get it eventually. It's just a matter of how long they want to make me wait to get it. They can wait up to about a month.
Now, the human side of this, Bob, because of the nature of some of the allegations, wouldn't the coach, and I realize that the district has purse strings as leverage, but wouldn't the coach want the ability to be sure he can clear his name and clear up any, unless he can't, wouldn't he want the ability to do that, and wouldn't he insist on that in any agreement that he signed?
Well, I mean, I guess that depends on how big a check you got, Bob.
Yeah, I get, no, I understand.
I will tell you that one person who didn't want to tell me any details was willing to go, who was familiar with the agreement, was willing to say that they understood that the coach got everything he wanted. And so, we'll see what the stipulation agreement says, but the people that I talked to who talked to the coach said he got a 1-year salary as his deal. That usually means he gets some medical benefits during that time and things like
whatever.
that.
And also, but these kinds of ancillary things do go on. I remember I was cutting a deal with a company I worked with for many years, and it was something you would appreciate. It was really an arbitration stage, but basically it was a lawsuit that I won. And when we were finally settling it, and I can't get into who because of my own confidentiality agreements or where it was, but one of the sticklers was that I said, I have to be eligible for rehire. And they said, well, if you sue this company, you can't be. I said, then we have no deal. Reputations matter. I said, you guys screwed up. I didn't. So I refused to be branded. Now, I'm sure unofficially they wouldn't have wanted me back, but officially I wanted it in the record that I was welcome. So people can do that, and if you care at all about one's reputation. So hopefully he did that.
Well, I mean, it's a negotiation. You can get, but I'm going to make a different point, if I can.
Sure.
Do you have a pencil and paper handy, Bob?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so write this down. So Coach D, 200,000. Okay. Joe Williams, 200,000. Brian Osborne, 300,000. Reggie Richardson, 200,000. So how much do those four add up to be?
Almost $1 million. Jesus.
About $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's funny about this idea that it's unthinkable that anybody would buy out Dr. Fajo's contract. That's $1.2 million. We've already spent $1 million on 4 other people, and I also reported we spent another $100,000 roughly on a low-level buildings and grounds employee. So you can throw that into the mix, and there's been others. So we have tossed away money in these kind of settlement agreements for many years, and just since 2008, over $1 million. So I'm not really for or against Fajo, but the argument that we can't justify buying her out, well, that's not borne out by past precedents. We've done that plenty of times.
Okay, and that's really important to understand. Bob Cox, our guest here on Radio Westchester, Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he. Bob, you said also on this air that you don't think this is going to go away, or at least the people that are against her aren't going to back off, and that equally that those that support her, principally right now the board and the personage of the president, Amy Mazzelli, and Ms. Fajo herself, that they've dug in their heels as well. Where do you think this goes? Do you think that there'll be any at least a truce with it to see how well this woman does in the job?
Well, no. I mean, truce wouldn't be the right way to think about it. But what will certainly happen, based on my longstanding experience, is that the wave of people showing up at board meetings on the Coach D issue had crested. You will see one last flurry of people showing up December 17th because now they know the outcome. So they'll be up there speaking about how he was ripped off and badly treated and the rest of it. By January, I'll put a number on it. 90% of those people won't be back, and they won't come back. They'll drift off to other things, and Coach D will presumably get a job someplace else. I've heard he's interviewing, and that'll be kind of the end of it. Now the resentment, that's going to stay. So the people in the football program, the people in the black community, the people in the union, their feelings are not going to change. They, put it simply, they don't trust Dr. Fahou. They don't want to deal with her. And that's going to be the case for as long as she's superintendent.
You don't think that she can win them back? See, I have some hope that she can, but from my minimal dealings with her, but we shall see.
Well, you haven't sat in any of these.
No, I know. I understand. No, well, that's why I go to you.
Show up at the next board meeting, December 17th, and you ask these people directly if they're going to be reconciled to Dr. Fahou, and you'll find out very quickly.
Oh, no, Bob, one of the things is why I mentioned when I introduce you, consider to consider the source is that you're mine. So, no, I take what you say, but I do share my hopes with you nonetheless.
No, I mean, I think there's a different question, which is, can she do enough things that cause people who are neutral to become her supporters? But right now, the supporters that she has, to me, it's kind of funny, and presumably some of them are listening to this. They don't know anything more about Dr. Fahou than I do. I mean, I probably know more because I've interviewed her 3 times directly, one-on-one, and I've been at all of her press conferences. I've been all for her various board presentations, except last week I didn't go. But I've been with her plenty since June, and I don't really know what she thinks. She speaks in scripted statements. She doesn't really let her guard down. Maybe she thinks that's a good thing. Maybe that is a good thing.
Maybe it is. Yeah.
But
that's fair.
I don't think that you can draw from the way she engages the public, the community, the press, as to what she's really all about. The only way we're really going to know that is time and what she ends up actually doing. And therefore, I don't understand the basis for being a big cheerleader for her, because it's like cheerleading for a cipher. I mean, we don't know what she thinks, so why would you be all for her?
That's a great word.
I can understand why people are against her because of the reasons we just discussed, but I don't understand the enthusiastic support. Her supporters are, kind of like the Donald Trump thing about, she could shoot somebody on, I guess in our case, North Avenue.
Let's say North Avenue. Well, we have a Fifth Avenue, my old haunt. We do have a Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, but so I don't quite understand that. My view has been that I will take a wait and see. All that said, when you're evaluating a superintendent, there's a number of different metrics that you use. One of them is certainly managing community relations. And there is no doubt that in that score, she would get an F. So she better be good at the other stuff because she's not good at the community relations.
Well, although in that case and this is where I give her the benefit of the doubt. If indeed she's a person of integrity and makes unpopular decisions, but that needed to be made, sometimes community relations are going to suffer. And that's because everybody wants their sacred cow to be accepted. But you're right. We shall see one way or another. Now,
I take your point. I mean, this is why it's funny because in my reporting, people, tell me that I'm doing a great job on Monday, and then they hate my guts on Tuesday, and then they love me on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Integrity is
reporting.
Yeah.
Well, when I reported about the guy at Isaac who had been suspended the same day as the coach, this is a teacher at Isaac, I reported that he's under police investigation. That's why he was suspended.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the people who were all happy with my original reporting weren't happy because that kind of undermined the case that Fahou was acting inappropriately. I think anybody would agree that if you're being investigated by the police for inappropriate contact with a student, you should be suspended until that's cleared up. And you will notice that all the hoopla about that particular teacher went away. So it really undermined the union's narrative, and it undermined the anti-FAHU narrative generally.
Yes.
That this teacher didn't get due process. Now, they'll still argue that they shouldn't have made it public and all that other kind of stuff, but I just go where the reporting leads me.
I know. I once had this conversation about you many years ago, having gotten to know you, through the press, doing what I do. And the discussion was whether or not you had any allegiances. And I was reminding them, no, just to the facts. And I said, and he will take them where they go, and it includes you and everyone else. So if you think you can co-opt him, you're barking up the wrong tree. And that's your best feature. But something that you have noted, though, it also makes a lot of enemies, Robert, and you've handled that well. I want to move on to a couple of other things. It's 9:26. We're talking with Bob Cox, the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source and certainly our source for things New Rochelle since 2008. Now, you don't let grass grow. All this stuff is on the front pages of our local news and sucking the air out of the room, the football coach. And by the way, just a little, I did contact the school, as we discussed, their PR people, and we're going to get some football players and coaches on and celebrate their victory separate from all of this, Robert.
Great.
So thank you for that reach out. What else is going on with the school district that's on your slow burner, but that you will soon be putting on the front burner?
Well, something that's been on the back burner all year has been whatever happened with the Apex grade fixing scandal.
Yes.
It's 1 year ago, actually last week, December 4th, that the board released the report that they had done. And at the time, they announced that they were sending the report to New York State's testing security unit. They also revealed that the state had an investigation going, and yet we never heard anything more about any of it. So when school started up again in September, I contacted the board president, and I said, what's the deal with the state investigation? It should be completed by now, right? It's been 10 months. Her answer was, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not aware of any state investigation. But we are waiting to hear back on the reopened Apex investigation.
Wow.
And we expect an answer within a month. So that was in September. Well, first of all, I don't understand how anybody could not be aware of the state investigation, because in the board president's case, she was sitting right next to Jeffrey Hasty when he read the statement about it. Obviously, she knows about it. But the public didn't know that they had reopened the Apex investigation. So I went back and forth and finally wrote an article about that in October. And I also started digging for other records, and I obtained hundreds of pages of records regarding what's been happening with the state. And I wrote a story about that, which was quite long. And it was all about what's been going on with the state investigation, the fact that this district attorney contacted the state asking to be read into the investigation. It looks like they finished their report in April of 2000, let's put it this way, the active phase of their investigation in April 2019. We still don't have anything about what happened with any of that, although on December 4th, the board president told me that they had finally received the, let's say, second version of Apex, the report, and they expected to discuss it in executive session on December 17th. I asked her if they intended to release a full unredacted copy like they had promised to do in the very beginning. And she said that that would be something that would get decided by the board, and it would be discussed on December 17th, which is, of course, a complete turnaround from where they were a year ago, where they were very proud of themselves for claiming they were going to release a full unredacted report. As you may recall, they never really did until I had gotten a copy and released it myself. So in any case, this is still an open question as to what happened. I did get a response from the registrar at the high school who wanted to set the record straight. I interviewed her. And and she basically denied within the Apex investigation report, and she denied what both Jeffrey Hasty, the board president at the time, and Amy Moselli, the current board president, had to say. So her statements in that interview, if true, and I have no reason to think they aren't, are a very big deal because it really undermines the credibility of the entire Apex report. Because if they weren't looking at the registrar records, which includes the transcripts and graduation paperwork, then how are they evaluating the graduations? And we already know they weren't getting access to the Apex data because the school district shut down access to it in the middle of the investigation. And my reporting also shows that they were withholding records and also that they destroyed records in the middle of the investigation. So I would say all this is a very big deal, and I'll have further reporting on it over the course of the month.
That's going to be very interesting stuff, Bob, because one of the concerns, and I remember some of your earlier stories and past stories about graduation rates and grade fixing. You know what someone suggested the other day, and it may have been yourself, so forgive me if I'm asking you a question you already answered. But someone said, and this does go back to Dr. Fahu, that if she does her job well, numbers may get worse before they get better, meaning that if we have honest test scores and honest grades and stuff, that there will be an arc downward because people who should have failed will fail, or people who shouldn't graduate won't graduate, et cetera. Do you subscribe to that theory?
Well, not only do I subscribe to it, Bob, you're right. I'm the one who said
that.
I
thought
last
okay.
week, so.
Yes. No, you got on. I talked
I
to 10,000 people a day.
I mean, let me put it that in context, okay?
Yes, please.
I'll give two examples. In 2010, the graduation rates came out for the high school, and they showed that the June graduation rate for Black and Hispanic students was in the 50s. Okay, I think it was 55 for Black and 52 for Hispanic. I mean, those are third world numbers, really low numbers. The next year, they were in the 70s, which meant there had been a 30-40% increase in 1 year in the graduation rate, which was, really implausible. In the course of a back and forth on the board, the superintendent at the time, Richard Organishak, kind of mumbled into the microphone, as he had a penchant for doing, to the effect of, I told you what would happen if we used the real numbers. Okay. So I not only believed that they were using fake numbers, but the superintendent basically admitted that they had been using fake numbers. The graduation rates have been inflated for years. And, probably the numbers of Black and Hispanic students graduating in the 50s is probably the more accurate number. I'll give you a second example. It has nothing to do with graduation rates. A number of years ago, the big topic in the schools was about bullying, right? Bullying.
Oh, sure, yeah, every day, yeah.
Okay. Well, you don't hear that anymore, but you did at the time. It was the sort of the topic of the day. And so at one school, Barnard, the principal talked about how everybody in the building had gone for training, okay, the special anti-bullying training. And now everybody in the building was now aware of what bullying looked like and that they could identify it much better. And then they announced the results. And the results showed that there had been this dramatic decrease in the number of bullying incidents reported since the training had been completed. I got up and spoke at that board meeting, and I said, well, this doesn't make any sense. If your people didn't all know how to identify bullying and they now do, then success would actually be that you have more bullying incidents being reported because now you got more people recognizing when it's going on. I don't see how there's a big decline. And that's because that's the way that people in school administration think, which is they just want to tell people what they want to hear. And what parents wanted to hear is that they had solved the bullying problem. So making up data, lying about the data, this is, standard operating procedure. It also happens with violent and disruptive incidents in schools. All this data is dramatically fudged and manipulated. None of it's really true. If you're relying on it for making decisions, you're going to be sadly disappointed. If FAHU wants to come in and actually accurately report on the number of violent and disruptive incidents in our school, or the actual number of bullying incidents, or what the real graduation rates are, the effect of that's going to be that our school district is going to look really bad for quite a while.
For quite a while, or for, how do you define quite a while, Robert?
Well, if our graduation rates for the next several years for minority students is at 55%, that's not good. If the violent and disruptive incidents is 3 or 4 times higher than we've been reporting, these things aren't going to go away overnight. Okay, the reality is that there are real numbers out there, and they're not going to just magically go away. So if she starts reporting the real numbers, we're going to have a new normal in reporting. It's not like we're going to get 400%.
Bob, I just want to reset.
In,
I just want to reset a little bit. You're listening to Radio Westchester. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone here on Radio Westchester. You can follow us on radiowestchester.com. Go to the podcast and streaming aggregator MyTuner.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, and YouTube. Our guest right now is Bob Cox. He is the managing editor and the publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008, and we certainly consider him that way here. Bob, when you go over these things, and I've read many of your stories over the years, one is left with, at what point, and I realize you're a journalist, not an educator, but still, you're a smart guy. You've been to school, but when we get down to the real true causes, because of politics, because of on either side, harshly judgmental people perhaps on one side, political correctness on another, where is the real, where's the dam in the stream? In other words, we realize that there are no simple answers. But if we reported them honestly and attacked the problem, what would we be attacking? Do we need better teachers? Are there social issues? Why do we even have such bad graduation rates among that community? And how do we keep from not being called racist when we even talk about it?
Well, so let's start with the idea that the numbers are what they are. Okay, so. We're not getting real numbers, but they are what they are. And if we ever got to see them, it's just reality. Now,
yeah,
I can tell you, I think to address your question, there's longstanding, academic research in the field of education as to what drives academic success for students. And there are 2 factors that drive academic success for students in schools.
Go ahead.
Number 1 is the education level of the mother, and the other is the job of the father. Those are the 2 drivers, okay? They overwhelm all other numbers in doing something like a regression analysis, statistical analysis of what drives success for students, okay? So if you have a student whose mother has a graduate degree as her highest level, and a father who works as an attorney, then that kid is highly likely to be successful in school. Race and ethnicity has nothing to do with it. It could be Black, Hispanic, white, Asian.
Of course.
If you have a lawyer and a mom with a master's, that kid is highly likely to succeed. If you have a mom that has a elementary school education, and you have a father who is either in some kind of, let's say, lower level blue collar type job, and or not even in the home at all, then that is going to predict that the student is not going to succeed. And it kind of makes sense, because how can a mom with a 4th grade education help their kid with their chemistry honors homework? She can't. Okay. If the father's not even in the home at all, how can they be a positive influence on the student? Well, then go look at what our population looks like in New Rochelle. We have a large population of people who've come here, mostly from Mexico, on the Hispanic side, where the mothers have very low levels of education. And on the in the Black community, you have a large number of families where the father is not present in the home. So we have a large population of kids who are already coming into the system highly unlikely to succeed. If you took the kind of data that they've been presenting recently, for example, the number of kids at the middle school who are in advanced math and science, they present that data and say, oh my God, that 60% of the white kids at Albert Leonard are in advanced math and science, and only 15% of Black and Hispanic kids are. Well, that's very misleading. If you disaggregated that data based on education of the mother and job of the father, and
then it makes some sense.
Well, then you might very well see, Bob, that in fact it's very evenly distributed among Black, white, and Hispanic, among families that have a well-educated
No, okay.
mother
This
and a job of
this
the
is
father.
exactly what I was looking for. I want you to go further on this, if you would, because obviously you've done your homework. Now we all know. Now they're more than anecdotal. For example, I had a secretary for 16 years who went high school educated, then went to Catherine Gibbs. Very smart, very hardworking woman. Brought up a son who's now one of the country's greatest sketch artists. Got scholarships to great schools, bright kid, hardworking. His mother was hardworking, which tells you a lot. But what I'm saying is, one could infer from studies that there are things that can be either imposed or that, if you will, a kludge, a workaround. What is the bypass? In other words, what kind of, is it special tutoring? Is it intervention with the family? What studies, what should we be doing differently, but not changing grades, blah, blah, blah. What could we do for those students who don't have those benefits? What do the studies show?
Well, I'm just focusing on, the studies are really about predicting academic success. So I don't have an answer for that. I don't know that there is an easy answer or even a hard answer. If there was one, I'm sure it would have been implemented. I just think that this is the reality, that kids that come from a certain background are highly unlikely to succeed academically. And I don't know how you turn that around. I don't think you can. That's why I don't fault the administration, the school board, or the teachers for this somehow to be magically solved, because I do think it's an intractable problem, okay, which is that you have kids coming out of families that are basically have almost 2.5 strikes against them coming out of the gate. I don't really know. I mean, the best thing that I think you can do is create opportunities for everybody who comes into your school, so that when the exception that proves the rule shows up in your classroom, that kid can in fact succeed against the odds. Because this doesn't mean that no kid is going to succeed, because I just said that you had 55% of the kids
right. No, I understand.
Graduating. So some of the kids are able to get through and succeed. I'm not saying none of them will.
No, I understand. Statistically, it's how it comes out in the wash. No, I get that. It just seems to me, though, with all the money that we invest, we all have, we catch a break. I'll give you I'm probably an example. I grew up lower working class. I've been in a foster home 7 years, and this is about me. I have a wonderful life, but and I had a very bright. My biological mom was very bright, worked very hard, and I got that from her. But there was this guy that owned a jelly factory next to my house, who loved science and politics and literature and read every newspaper he could get his hands on. And he used to take me around to like science clubs. Like he took me to the Brooklyn Academy of Music to look at what was later going to become the hunt for the moon. We would talk about science and pulsars. And I mean, it's 1956, for God's sakes. But that guy, that interest that he gave me in things, for lack of a better word, cerebral, stayed with me my whole life. There must be a way to provide Chris Schultes, God rest his soul. There must be a way to provide Chris Schultes for these kids.
Well, I mean, first of all, there are programs to do that, and secondly, you're actually speaking directly to why people were so emotional about what happened with Coach
I know.
T,
I realize that
he was a person who did that for a lot of kids, and there are teachers who have that kind of intervention. There are adults that have that kind of intervention. As I said, not all kids who have mothers without an education or fathers without a high-powered job, they don't all fail. It's just as a predictor of success.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Odds are against them. But yeah, obviously there are kids who, regardless of background, are exceptionally bright. And then we have to make sure that they get the enrichment opportunities and the educational opportunities that they need to succeed. And, over time, maybe you can sort of break that cycle because these kids go on to some success. But I just think if you're looking at, sort of the numbers, I guess I would refer to it this way. At the Albert Leonard presentation on their data, there was people in the audience who were heckling the principal of the middle school.
Why?
Because he was showing data that showed that the likelihood of a white student being in advanced math and science was 4 times higher than a black or Hispanic student. Okay. I don't really view that as the fault of the principal. In fact, I know the principal, and I'm sure he would give his right arm to have there be equity and parity on those numbers. But it's just, by the time these kids are getting to 6th, 7th, 8th grade, is that really something that's in his control? And then, of course, it continues on into high school. I will tell you that some of the academic studies have said one thing that actually could help, which is that it's called race matching, okay? And the idea is that if you have students in elementary school who have the opportunity to be matched up with a teacher who is of the same race or ethnicity as them, they are more likely to go to college. Okay.
If that's empirical, it should be worked on. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, there's no follow-on effect, so you don't see that those kids then carry that forward into middle school or high school in terms of academic performance. But there is this one piece that says that. So what you really want to do, and I've actually been talking about it for 10 years, is we want to hire more, especially male black, ideally, elementary school teachers. But then here's the problem with that, okay? They're kind of like unicorns, all right? There's a state database that keeps track of all across the country who's graduating with undergrad and grad degrees in education, which are required in every state to be certified as an educator. And the number of black and Hispanic people who are completing those programs has actually been declining, and it's a very small number. The vast majority of people who get those degrees are white women. The decline in black and Hispanics has been offset by an increase in Asians. And I've seen this myself. My wife's a professor at the Teachers College at Columbia University, which is the top education school in the country. I walk down the hallway sometime, and mostly what I see is white women. I see occasionally Asian women, and very, very rarely do I see anybody else, black or Hispanic, and black men, Hispanic men, very, very, very rare.
Do we know why men? Do we know why men in general aren't getting into these professions?
Do we know why? I don't know why. I just know that they're not. And so, there's a push in this community to build on some of the stuff I was talking about 10 years ago, and they've confused it. Okay, they've confused it because they go around saying that kids can't succeed unless they have teachers and administrators who look like them.
That's silly.
Well, they're basing it on what I said.
Yes, I understand that, and it would be better. But there's the old axe, good, better, best.
It's not better. It's a complete bastardization of what I said.
Well, yes.
Okay, what I said was in elementary school, and if you have the opportunity to be matched with somebody like you, meaning you don't necessarily have to get a black male teacher. There just has to be a black male teacher available to you to possibly get. That as what's shown to have an impact. You cannot take that information, which is empirical data coming out of multiple reports, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina. You can't take that and say every administrator, every teacher has to be black or Hispanic.
Well, of course.
That's what some people are now pushing for, in particular the people who have been showing up at board meetings over the past year or so.
Silly.
The people from New Roar and indivisible Westchester. That's a big part of their idea, that we have to have all black and Hispanic people. I would tell them, if you got your way and every single employee of the district was black or Hispanic, it wouldn't make one bit of difference on closing the achievement gap, because there's no evidence that makes a bit of difference. What does make a difference is at the elementary level, it has a limited impact. That said, you do what you can do. So if we can find more Black and Hispanic teachers at the elementary school level, especially Black and Hispanic male teachers, we should certainly try to do that, but understand this. They are rare. They are rare. It's just a fact.
They are rare. And you know,
And
the other
wanna-
thing, Bob, if I may, and I wanted to ask you about this, and this is always a touchy subject, but you started out with empirical data regarding what gives a student advantage going to school. And I went through this when I was involved with my brother's keeper as well. Sooner or later, you wind up finding that trail back to the home life. And is not a school is limited in how much they can intercede in those issues. I mean, if a kid's going home and his parents aren't home, or they're both working, or one is addled in some way, you know, how does a school deal with that? Can they deal with that?
Well, I mean, we do that in this community. There are programs that are run by various organizations, including the Boys and Girls Club and others, that do after-school tutoring. Mariano Rivera is working on doing the same thing. So there are efforts to do all that stuff that obviously can have a positive impact. And so, you know, that may be a way to legitimately up performance, up graduation rates, not just fudging the numbers. And we have been doing that for a long time, and we can certainly do more of it. But at the end of the day, you know, in a family situation, you either are education sensitive parents or you're not. You're either really committed to your child's education or you're not. And it's not really up to the school district to twist somebody's arms to make them be that
well,
way.
of course not. So
there's a limit to what can be done. But I would say that if we disaggregated the data by socioeconomic factors and race and ethnicity factors, we would find out that Black, white, and Hispanic kids perform at the same levels when you adjust the data for the education of the mother and the job of the father, which I would use, for example, salary as a proxy for that. You can run those numbers. And that would leave this large bucket of kids who are low performing that don't fit the category of a well-educated mother and a job with a father with a high-performing job. You know, that might not make people feel any better, but it would certainly highlight the fact that this isn't something about racism. This is about the nature of the families that these kids are coming from. And yes, we can do certain things. Like I said, hire people at the elementary school level, after school programs, all that kind of stuff. And again, it's not that these kids, none of them graduate, but not enough of them graduate. Not enough of them are succeeding. So there are things that are helping, and we are getting things done. But I don't think you can blame these numbers on the school district itself or the teachers, or in the case of Albert Leonard, the principal. I think that's incredibly unfair. And if people in the Black community or Hispanic community want to complain about the lack of teachers in our schools who are Black and Hispanic, they ought to maybe look in the mirror, because why aren't they or their friends and colleagues going on to pursue careers in education? The statistics are very clear. They traditionally have not done that, and the numbers are actually declining over the past 10 years.
Bob Cox, I've got to say this to you. One of the things I like about this new radio station is I can make a battlefield decision to move a break. And one of the things we also did, God, I hate giving you any kind of a compliment, but for this piece, when we added this 1 hour long form interview, some people, well, why are you going to do that? Because you can get into depth. And I have to tell you, you just justified my decision to move my break to 9:55 instead of 9:30. And I'm not saying you or we or anybody has all the answers, but these are the kinds of discussions that need to take place. And I really appreciate it. Very nice job. Thank you. Well done.
Well, thanks. And I don't think I've got any answers either. I just think I know what some of the right questions are.
No, but it matters. And this is why we added these long form interviews, because you can't do it. Usually morning shows, 8 minutes you're out, 8 minutes you're out, and that has its place. but this is very important. Thank you very, very much. We have to get into our commercial obligations and another weather break, but I really appreciate all your time and keep doing what you do. Bob Cox, managing editor, publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You have a great day. Yep, and that was my point, folks. That's why we do long form interviews. It's why we have Harlan Ullman on and others like Bob Cox, and we'll be getting more as we continue to build this wonderful. It's almost not an experiment anymore, and we appreciate the callers and we appreciate the openness. Again, we don't have all the answers, and there are people that will diametrically disagree with stuff Bob said or I say or that you, when you call in, say. But that's what we do here. This is Radio Westchester, the program Mornings with Bob Marrone. We're coming up on the end, but we want to take care of some other business. We do have to give you another weather report, and that is now. The weather is, well, it's still about 44 now, overcast, windy with periods of rain today. It'll get up to 55, and that'll be our average temperature. Tonight, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. They're getting up to 55 still. They're holding around 55. Now, the kicker is tomorrow. Get out your bathing suits. Cloudy with a little rain late in the day, but it's going to be 61, which tells us the rain will come after the heat. But don't get too excited about it. On Wednesday, we'll have snow early in the morning. Then it'll be cloudy, but getting down to 36, a little frosty, but at night, tomorrow night, 24. You'll see some sun on Thursday, but it'll only get up to about 32 degrees. And that weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Our sponsors for this bottom of the hour, Aging Issues Radio, and our friends at, well, actually their parent company, Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, virtual reality. Remember, as soon as we do the grand opening, we're working with the city on that. You will get the opportunity to experience that at no cost in our studios at the train station. And, of course, the cigar, Dominic's Fine Cigars over in Larchmont, Padrons, and many other fine cigars. They're open 7 days a week. They're right over on Boston Post Road in Larchmont, and also by our friends at United Hebrew, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. I'd like to thank the callers today, Mitch, and of course, she called in because she's doing a biology. I wonder what that's all about. Down in Washington, D.C., and we appreciate that call as well. Also, Vince Russo, George Latimer, Jake's Picks. He was terrific today. Thank you very much. Congressional candidate David Buchwald, Bob Cox, and of course, I know we heard from Mitch. Oh, and I realized I just looked at my notes. I skipped her actual name, Lorraine Carl. Thank you so much for the call. Tomorrow, of course, our show will be headlined by Jeannie Zaino, and we will be talking. Oh, no, not Jeannie Zaino. That is, of course. Let me see. I had the wrong day. That is Wednesday. On Tuesdays, we have a whole different cast, but some surprises for you. But most importantly, I want to thank you also for participating in yet another edition of Something Here. We'd like to thank all the listeners today, particularly new ones that we've picked up, Albany in particular, and Upper New York State. Also, we'd like to thank all of you because we've built a radio station. We're adding new shows. We're adding new content. We'll be reaching out to new sponsors. And now, today, we have tested remote equipment so that we can bring the show to your place of business, to your institution, to your nursing home, to your auto dealership. And we can do the show and send out all our broadcast quality. Now, today, we worked on our audio, and everything worked fine except I ran out of gas on my music. Somehow I lost power on my music bed, but everything worked aside from that little hiccup. And of course, we're adding a better hold feature on our phones, more phone lines. But thank you for being a part of this experiment in new radio. Maybe that's what we should call it. This is the future of radio. and we're glad to be a part of it. I'm Bob Marrone for all of us here at Radio Westchester. Jake, great job today. We will talk with you tomorrow. You have a great day.